What's up, everybody? It's time for another episode of ALLCRAFT, and this week we have a guest who, every single time he's been on the show, something major has changed in the game. Will it happen again? Will the prophecy be fulfilled? It's Ziqo. Ziqo, there are probably plenty of things that we got to talk about in both the alpha and everything that's already live in BFA, but I feel like one thing is for sure. This is probably the weirdest, in some good ways, and in some just like really weird ways, end of an expansion that we've ever had, just with the progression in both PvP and PvE. How are you feeling about this final patch of BFA?
It's good to be back, first of all. What's up, guys? And yeah, I don't know. I got mixed feelings. I mean, I came back, so I stopped after patch 8.1, and I was kind of just doing the whole classic thing. And then in 8.3, I gave it a go, and I came back, and I mean, I like some stuff, but I like that the game has potential to be a lot faster. Mm-hmm. But I don't like, it feels like it has a lot of the growing pains that like the legendary system used to have in the future, stuff like that.
People in Asmon's chat started going muted.
Dude, yeah, when you said that, I actually had to double check.
Dude, I actually got nervous as well. I looked at the chat. I actually got so nervous.
I was too. I changed some audio settings, and I was thinking to myself, like, I've had so many technical difficulties today. Like, my game's crashed like a dozen times. Like, the audio's been lagging. Like, everything's been fucked up. So the first thing I thought is like, okay, here we go again.
So
it's just one more thing
for AWC, because we're obviously doing it all online. There's like this whole process, and Zico's is by far the most complicated because he has to be in like 3 different channels, like figuring out what's going on with replays and all this stuff, and it's caused him to be muted like quite a bit on the show, and it's become a little bit of a thing. But yeah, I feel like this is it's a strange end game, but there is a lot of potential, right? I feel like that's kind of where most people sit, right? You look at the fact that you can all of a sudden have like 1,000,000% haste on a character. Versatility is obviously very popular, but then you talk about that potential for damage. I mean, how did you feel about some of the changes to different things like gushing wounds, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't very happy about it because, on the contrary, I'm one of the lucky few, all the people crying about.
So you got lucky because you already had them.
I had 5 gushing. Asmon, I have a ring. The ring from King's Rest with haste Versa? I got a 475 socket gushing. It was like Christmas Eve, dude.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
how sad that is that they nerfed it.
I know. It's complete bullshit, man. I came back to the game. Like, Arcane was, pretty bad. But then, all of a sudden, I got my gushings, and Arcane looked like the best spec. So I was sad about the changes overall.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think when you look at echoes as well, echoes are probably one of the hottest topics. But before we get to that, I want to talk about versatility, right? We've talked about some of the things already with gushing and potential for damage. How do you like versatility in the game right now, especially when we do know we are going to get PvP vendors again? Is this a stat that you think is important for the game, important for PvP, and has a place in PvE as well?
Well, it has a place in PvP and in PvE, but I don't like it as a stat because I feel like it overshadows some of the other stats sometimes. Like, since I play Arcane Mage, we'll just use that as an example. Like, you will have Mastery, which increases the damage of your 2 specific spells, like Barrage and Arcane Blast. But then you'll have Versatility, which increases the damage of those 2, and like missiles and Arcane Explode, like everything, and it gives you damage reduction. So I feel like it's too strong in general. And in PvE, I think for tanks, it's what you stack for like Mythic Plus. So I don't know. It feels like, I think we could do without it, or at least if the defensive portion of it was nerfed, so it wasn't like always the best choice.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's like really weird with it. I'm kind of curious how Asmon feels about it as well, because we talked about it on the show.
Versatility? Fuck, dude. Like, I like versatility because it's my best stat, and it makes it to where I only get 2 shot instead of 1 shot in like Arena. Like, warriors kind of die really fast. But I was watching a little bit of the PvP, the AWC, and I think, didn't it go for 12 hours? Ziqo, you'd know, you were there.
Yeah, so
12 hours.
I think it was a little bit more than 12 hours. We finished at 7 a.m. my time.
7 a.m. Oh my god. So what was the highest dampening that you guys got to?
89%.
89. Okay, so
I don't know if that was this weekend or the weekend before that.
I
But the
feel
highest
like
we've
that
gotten so
might
far
have
is 89.
something to do with versatility.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's not just versatility. Wait, we got a lot of work here to do, gentlemen. Like if we're gonna
Vitality conduits, probably.
yeah,
also
vitality
a huge
conduit
culprit.
is that's number one. That one's gotta get nerfed. I mean, like that one is just crazy. It doesn't cost mana. It heals in dampening. It redistributes evenly in dampening. Like, bro, that one's gotta go for sure.
Are you making Glad Push this time, Asmon? Because I know that you usually do it like at least once or twice.
I hope so. I mean, the thing is that I've tried to get every Proto Drake mount. Like I have the black Proto Drake. I don't want to have a single Proto Drake in the game that I don't have, which is like a really stupid thing, but you know, here we are. And I've gotten it every fucking BFA patch. So yeah, I do still want to get it. So I mean, the weird thing about it is versatility, I'm pretty sure is still going to be my best stat. So even though they nerfed it, my class is just now shittier. That's really all it comes down to. Yeah, I'm just a little bit shittier. And I don't know, 2400, like I mean, people are already like 3K rated almost. So getting up to 2400 shouldn't really be that much of a challenge.
I actually feel like it's right now, the beginning's harder than it's ever been before. And then it gets pretty easy, right? Because like everybody who's in the middle area, Ziqo, you can talk to this, whether this is true or not. But I feel like anybody who's around like the 2K area is just kind of like full Papeg. All the really good players are at like 1400 farming echoes right now.
You're not wrong.
You run into AWC teams at like 1200 rating. It's absurd how the echoes work to farm. Like by far, the best way to farm is to be low rated in twos and just spam twos all day.
Yep, it's true.
Well, I didn't even know that the echoes were so good, but I won like one arena game and I got something like I don't know how many echoes. I forgot exactly, but it was like 50 echoes or something like that.
The game doesn't know either. That's actually one of my biggest problems. Yeah, Ziqo and I have talked about this. There's actually an RNG range depending on your rating, which doesn't really make sense to me. I think that's like one of the weirdest things about it because I think Ziqo actually said this before. Like you queued with, you're playing twos and your healer got like double the amount of echoes that you got at the same exact rating, which feels kind of weird. I think it's something like if you're at least in my experience, if you're at like 1500, 1600 area, you can get 30 to 60 echoes.
Yeah.
To be fair, Rich, your healer deserves double the amount of echoes, man. I've seen what's going on.
Hey, man, I pick a target. I do the damage. Yeah, Super Tease deserves like triple the echoes right now, especially when I'm on the hunter, man. Dude, every now and then though, I Kobe the trap out, and Sid just compliments me for like 3 hours. But yes, it is a little bit weird that it's RNG, right? I do kind of feel like it should be based off of the rating. I like the fact that like I've said this before. I think getting echoes for everything that you do feels really good. I actually think it feels the way that artifact power should have felt. I think echoes, although there are some things with the system that definitely need to change, it is one of those currencies where you're like, wait, this actually works, and it doesn't feel as toxic as artifact power did because of the never-ending system to it. It feels like there are achievable goals along the way. There are kind of prestige things that you can do with it at the end. Because the thing is at a certain point, right, once you already had all of your corruptions, you could basically have a bunch of echoes and go, you know what? I'm just going to try full ineffable truths for no reason at all and see if it's fun. And that's kind of an interesting thing. The rotation makes it very hard to enjoy that. I think a few other things make it hard to enjoy the echoes. But I think if twos was cleaned up, it would actually be an incentive to queue. Like Ziqo, how do you think it should actually scale based off of rating and how many echoes you're actually getting?
Well, I think in general, the harder the thing you're doing is, the more rewarding it should be. So I think if, like, I would make it based off of your rating or based off of your MMR, and I would make it based off of match length as well. If a match was longer, then you should get a little bit more. Maybe not enough that it's better to just sit AFK in a match, but, you know, you have to balance that. And also another thing, you know, I did Mythic, so, you know, I'm a pretty big deal in PvE, Asmon. I don't know if you know, but
me too.
They call me the Guild Reaper here in Europe.
Yeah. How many guilds have you killed?
It's too many to count. I mean, the last guild, you know, my classic guild, rest in peace, man. It was it was all a dirty money laundry scam in the end. You know,
the little goblins.
The little goblins, man. Me and Van, we're retired these days. You know, that's why you never hear us talk about it anymore.
All right.
But yeah, I was raiding Mythic Hive Mind, you know, and we were wiping for like 3 hours, and you know, I was feeling the heat, and then eventually, finally, we killed the boss. I walked up to the boss, I looted the boss, 60 gold. I closed the window.
Congrats.
I look in my chat. Thank you. I look in my chat. I say I got 51 echoes of Ny'alotha. We wiped for 3 hours, man.
51 echoes.
I could have just 1v2'd like a 700 MMR team, man. I could have had double, you know? And one of the guys that I was raiding with told me it's between 50 and 150 complete RNG. Bro,
wait, for mythic bosses?
For mythic bosses, yeah.
Well, okay, so here's the other thing, though, that's a little bit weird, right? Because you don't truly know how many echoes that you got from... I could be wrong about this, but let's say that you did a heroic beforehand. You would get a portion of the echoes that you would get for the mythic boss on the heroic, right? It basically like the same as if you did a normal, you would get a certain amount of echoes, but if you did heroic later, you wouldn't get the full heroic amount. You get a discount heroic amount, which is basically just the tax bracket above normal. And if you do heroic beforehand and then you do mythic, you don't truly know how much you get, and then you would just get a slice off the top, which then I do believe, like you said, still does have RNG attached to it.
Well, I hadn't done heroic though.
Okay, so you actually just straight up. So that means like
straight up just bought a mythic carry, you know.
Okay, which means that somebody could go in and do a heroic and then do a mythic and maybe get like what 30 or 20 echoes or something like that. I'm not 100% sure.
It's not proportional to the time invested. I mean, obviously the echo balance
it's the same for wait. People are saying that I'm wrong. It's the same for all difficulty levels.
I have no idea.
I thought that it was you only got a slice off the top. I could be wrong about that.
That would make sense though.
But 3 hour wiping carry lol W.
Yeah, it's a lot of money for that.
What can I say?
You got your money back. You got the gold back. But yeah, I think that right now there's definitely been that topic again of, you know, where gear is coming, like what the sources actually are for your best in slot gear for all aspects of the game. I actually think raiding, and Asmon, I'm curious how you feel about this. I feel like raiding feels really pointless right now in a lot of ways, which I don't like. Like the only thing that I can get in raid on any character, like look at a heroic, for example. You need Azurite and maybe a trinket and maybe your corrupted weapon.
Well,
right?
What's so specific about it? What's so specific about it is the fact that you need the two stats. Like most specs, as far as I know, are running some sort of stat amp. And the stats on the gear in Ny'alotha is fixed. So because the stats are fixed, you know that maybe you only need one piece of gear out of there, and you already have a 470 version of, like, let's say you need Haste Mastery, and you already have a 470 version of Haste Mastery. So what are you going to get going into Mythic Ny'alotha? A 5 item level increase. And the stat amps, I like the stat amps a lot, but one negative effect from having them is that it makes any gear that doesn't have the right stat that you want on it, instead of it being just kind of not very good, it's just not good at all because of the like how it scales, because you're not multiplying it by the percentage too.
The entire talk about the amp stuff. I actually like the fact that amps are in the game in a lot of ways, because I think it opens up a new avenue of progression that does seem very powerful for the end of an expansion. It does kind of create a weird cycle that I think we're going to feel very quickly when we actually do get into Shadowlands and that's all gone. But I personally just feel like there's no point to heroic raid in so many aspects of the game, because you just get higher item level out of Mythic Plus, and Mythic Plus is way easier for everything besides the Azurite. I mean, if you're going to wait on the Azurite and play the gambling mini game that they've put in and just roll tokens, you can do that and you can still get higher item level, especially if RNG is on your side. It feels like every slot in the game right now is just a stat stick that you corrupt on top of, which means that you're waiting for the lottery from your 5 mask vision for your 470 and your chest at the end of the week for the 475. Everything else just feels like you're killing time waiting for those rolls to happen, which I don't think is the best feeling. And then there are a few chase pieces, right? You look at, I'm trying to think of some of the trinkets that are actually chase pieces, because there are a few that are obviously very dressed to gaff. There are a few class dependent ones, right? I mean,
I got that on my mage, so that one is not class dependent.
Well, I mean, you look at mage too, though. I mean, mage is one of the few classes that has a class that has a chase item that's outside of Ny'alotha as well, right? Like mages in PvE are going to still want their font of power, but for the most part, every single item that people are getting, it's simply, let's see how high I can get the item to be. I'm going to put my corruptions, which I've already bought, on top of that item. And then there's maybe 1 or 2 items out of the raid that you're actually getting. And most of those people kind of give up on unless they're getting carries, because your best Azerite for most classes, now there are obviously some classes where this isn't true, like your two of your best Azerite pieces are going to be on the final 2 bosses, which are hard. And I don't mind that those are gated behind that, but I don't know, raiding just feels weird to me right now. As somebody who's rated for a very long time.
There's not a lot of reasons to do it, and I think that the issue is the same, like we talked about this before with profession gear, and how profession gear doesn't really hold the same value as it used to. And I think one of the big reasons is because there's just so many other avenues of getting gear. And if you know that you're going to be able to get your free piece of gear, like 2 or 3 free pieces of gear every single week, then the gain that you're going to get out of getting those other pieces doesn't really matter as much. And I think also there aren't really as many incentives to really motivate players to push above and beyond what they kind of are just easily able to do. Like there's no real incentive, for example, for anybody to do anything above a 15. Like why would you want to go after doing a plus 20 except for Raider IO? And that's not even an in-game thing. That's like a third-party thing anyway. So it doesn't matter to begin with. And there are almost no motivating factors to get people to play beyond that. And there's the other issue is that heroic raiding is very easy at this point, and mythic raiding requires a guild and like a very fixed group of people. So like the difference between doing heroic N'Zoth and doing like mythic raiding in general and any boss really besides maybe Rathian is that there's such a massive organizational gap between the two that it's very hard to get people to actually take that next step. And I don't know exactly what Blizzard can do about that, but I think probably like making some of the end bosses in Heroic a little bit harder and give better gear, and then make some of maybe the earlier Mythic bosses a little bit easier to make the transition easier for players could be good. But I think that it's also the fact that the item level that you are able to get is just so static across the board. Like you're really looking at the difference between 470 and 475. Is it worth 12 hours of your time every single week to get 5 more item levels? Probably not.
A few people in chat instantly brought up the idea of should there be less difficulty levels, which is obviously something that we've talked about before, but it does seem like one of those things where it would solve a lot of those problems. The item level problem in Mythic Plus, just the fact that it negates so many of the things in Mythic, do you think that that would be affected if there were less difficulty levels?
100%. 100%. Like, because basically Blizzard has this idea that there has to be a 15 item level difference between each tier of difficulty. So inside of every single tier, you're having at least 60 item levels of change. And for Ny'alotha, it's even more because the last 2 bosses have a higher item level, and the Shara didn't have that. So you're looking at starting at, most people are starting at, let's say, like 440, somewhere around there at the beginning of the patch, maybe 435. And maybe some of the casual players are 430. And they're going all the way up to 475. So that's like a 35 item level increase. And you compare that to something like Wrath of the Lich King, and inside of one tier, you're having more than half of the power growth that happened inside of all of Wrath. And Wrath had a massive power creep. So if you compare that, you have like situations now where people are going into these old raids, and I did the old tier bosses, and the bosses died in like 6 seconds, like 5-7 seconds. I mean, we literally, back in the day, you would have a tougher time doing Burning Crusade raids in Wrath of the Lich King than you have now doing old BFA raids in BFA.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually really wild when you go in and do it. Like, you go into like Fetid Devour, and it's actually it's over before you can even pop cooldowns. It's just dies so fast, which I don't really think we've experienced anything like that before. I think an overarching thing though here that we should definitely look at, because it seems like it's a theme in both the PvE and the PvP side of things though, is are you being proportionally rewarded for the difficulty of the task that you're completing? Because Ziqo, right now, it feels like high-end arena, you're not necessarily getting as many echoes as you should, if that's what you're going after. Are you getting enough gear? Or is it more beneficial to be doing stuff on the lower end? Are you more rewarded on the lower end? And then on the PvE side of things, it feels like you're getting more rewarded for maybe just going in, doing your weekly chest, and not organizing a raid nearly as frequently as you did in the past. Do you think that is an issue kind of across the board right now, Ziqo?
Well, I feel like it's not just an issue with the power progression within the expansion or like within BFA itself. I think it's an issue as well when you cross expansions. Like when you get a new expansion and the green gear that you get from Quest is already better than your epic gear that you just raided for months, you know? I think that's something that happens in general. The power creeps they're just kind of out of hand. That's why, we need to squish the HP and squish the levels and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think some of that comes because, WoW is a really old game as well. And I think some of those are just, kind of burdens because of that. But I think for sure when it comes to just designing the gear within one specific expansion, I think you should try to aim at having people want to go back and do the old content too. Like, if you can get an item that's base, like in Classic, for example, you can get Mind Quickening Gem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that item is like base, all the way to BC. Like that's a great trinket. If you can make items that, are like one piece from this raid is going to be base, like Font of Power, and then you're going to have like a couple of items in the new raid are base, but you're still going to want to use maybe like your old set bonus. Like I feel like if they can make the gear a little bit more unique and a little bit less stat stick, then you're also going to be able to solve that issue a little bit better.
Kind of like Crucible of Storms, the gear there.
Yeah.
With like the special stats and all. Yeah, I think that'd be a really good idea. Just like giving raiding gear additional properties. And like we used to have that. We had that with tier sets.
Yeah.
And now we don't have that. So it's like, you're effectively replacing Azerite gear with tier sets. Or sorry, replacing tier sets with Azerite gear. And I don't know, like you can get Azerite gear anywhere. So there's like very few things that are unique to raiding.
The Azerite gear system too is just like one I'm very glad to see go. I mean, there definitely so there's some like I know that some people in chat will probably say that they like it. I can understand things about it that people maybe do like a little bit, but for me, I'm just very happy to see it go. I mean, especially with the meta of rolling with Titan Residuum or whatever the heck it's called, like that just does not feel good, and I'd much rather be actually seeing a boss drop a tier set or something like that. But I mean overall the reward systems when we do get to Shadowlands do seem like they are moving in that direction though, don't they? I mean, when you look at different legendaries that you're going to be getting in Torghast, that's a new avenue for progression. Doesn't it seem like gear is potentially going to be less stat stick dependent? I think Mythic Plus is one of the things.
Have we seen any gear from BFA though? From Shadowlands though?
Shadowlands. I feel like only the legendaries, right? Like that's the only thing that we have to go off of.
And we haven't really seen those either. Like I don't think they've brought out any real samples of what a legendary is going to look like. So we could have this problem in Shadowlands as well. And I think like really Blizzard's always trying to balance it, because if you give raiding stuff unique stats, some of those unique stats are just going to mathematically be better than other alternatives. And then people are going to feel like they're compelled to raid, like they have to raid. And I think that's like a problem Blizzard's had to balance between making players happy just doing their type of content and then trying to motivate them to do other types of content without alienating them and making them feel like they're being forced into it. And I think that's probably why they've, normalized so much of the gear.
This is actually a really interesting thing that I wouldn't have thought of immediately, even though it's something that we've talked about before. Why News said it in the chat. Yeah. He said, why not have legendaries be quest chains and raids again? I actually think things like that are really good for a raid tier. I feel like they're things that keep you playing, even if you're not the person who's actively involved in that quest chain.
Because you're helping someone.
Yeah, and it's a big moment when it does happen. I think it's a thing that people remember a lot. I mean, even watching people make Thunder Fury, for example.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking about as well. As soon as you brought that up.
Yeah, I think there would be a lot of great things they could do like that. I mean, making legendaries more of like a guild accomplishment, I think, is really important. But I don't know. I feel like Blizzard has tried to. It's like with the removal of Master Loot, for example. They've tried to make each individual player non-interactive with each other, and I think that's basically. I think that they've looked and they've said, people really get upset whenever this, that, or the other thing happens, and because of that, we want to prevent that from being the case. And so they've ended up creating situations where players don't really interact with each other at all in fear of having negative interactions.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that.
I see what you're saying.
I mean, across the board, you can definitely see it in quite a few different avenues of the game, right? I want to talk, though, about that fall-off that Ziqo started to mention with leveling. I think one of the initial things that was said about BFA, and it was an early criticism that you have every now and then, but not in the way that you really had it in BFA. Usually people level and you're like, yeah, new stuff. And it takes a little while before you actually start looking at stuff critically, because all the flashy new toys that you get are just going to distract you from anything else. People are just excited to play the new World of Warcraft. BFA started off pretty much right out the gates where people were like, wait, why the heck am I stronger at 111 than I am at
120?
At 120.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? And there were a whole bunch of
started on that.
Well,
you talking about the secret scaling thing, dude.
I wasn't even. I didn't even need to jump into that, but yeah, secret scaling was pretty wild.
Oh my god. Yeah, the secret scaling. I said that as soon as it got here. I was like, bro, like, why do I need a PhD to understand how much damage my characters do?
I had that happen to me today. So
thanks.
Yeah, I got another tier 2 Twilight Devastation. So I think I have Twilight Devastation, like 11 ranks of it. So I queue into an arena and I want to just like hit somebody for like a one shot basically with it. I go to this Warlock. He's got 374k health. I hit him with a 425k Twilight Devastation.
He lives.
Yeah. I don't know what to say, but it's basically what's ended up happening. I was so frustrated, man. And it's the same. I think that the best example is that if you try to do Reaping Flames in PvP, and you see like Reaping Flames, it's like, okay, it's going to do this much damage. You see it do 168,000 damage, and then their health only goes down 100k if they have low health. I don't understand like what the logic is behind that. Because it's literally lying to the players. It's saying, hey, you're doing this much damage, but there's actually this completely, different system that's in play at the same time.
Well, I think the idea is to reduce the power gap between like a new player and a geared player.
Yeah.
But I think the way it's doing it is not in a good way. And the other thing is that if you don't even look at just that, if you look at the fact that our characters, most of our damage comes from gear, right, and from items, from procs, like damage procs.
Yeah. Not
necessarily from our abilities. So because of that, well, a new player who doesn't have any of those items is going to be at a massive disadvantage, bigger than ever, against someone who has a full cloak and a full neck and full gushing or whatever, Versa or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like the problem is still there and it's still worse. But now, in addition to that, you can't even see how much damage you're doing, how much healing you're doing. You can't theory craft, which, in my opinion, is a really fun thing about the game.
Well, you can't plan things out. And it's also, I think that the worst part about it is psychological, where it feels like everything is kind of out of your control, right? I mean, you don't control how much damage you're dealing, what is in your control. And I don't know, to me, seeing that happen is very demotivating.
I think it's one of those things, though, too, where it's just expecting the player base to see the damage numbers and just poggers, dude, big damn, and not actually ever take the second to think wait, I didn't actually do that much damage because this person had that much health. It just seems like it's so obvious that that's not going to fly for a large amount of players. But yeah, just big coggers every time you see the damage numbers. But there's more than that, right? If you took out some of the scaling that happened, obviously the scaling was a large component to it, but you also had this odd moment where you could have a bunch of tier sets on, a bunch of Azerites, still be getting all of those old effects and legendaries while you were leveling, right? You could have basically all three of those things working in your favor, which is a huge amount of power, right? You're getting power from both expansions. Is that a problem in leveling? Because we could very easily be in a position right now where while you're leveling, you have a bunch of haste, a bunch of crit, a bunch of whatever because of your corruptions. And yeah, I think a lot of people are instantly saying, yes, it's a problem, but we need to talk about how it actually moves forward, because is the answer not getting power in the previous expansion? Obviously not, right? Like, we do want to have those moments where you hit your full best in slot, you feel the full weight of your power, and then there's this moment where the reset needs to happen. How does it happen? Because when you actually do look at corruptions, for example, I think usually one of the things that happens is, I don't know how it'll actually come into play with the stat squish, but usually a point of crit is going to have a different value at every level. So does that mean the gear that you have just becomes less powerful with each level, which then forces you to get new pieces of gear, which might even be green gear? I mean, how do you guys actually feel about how this should interact as we do level in the new expansion?
Honestly, just reset the shit. Like, I mean, they're doing a stat squish, just reset it as much as possible. I don't really think, like, at this point in time in the game, it's very clear that Blizzard has given up on leveling meaning anything. In 7.3, or whenever they started adding in the allied races, Blizzard was like, it was hard to tell what they were going to do. But now they've kind of, because they're doubling it or something like that in Shadowlands, how long it takes to level, by doubling, cutting it in half, cutting the time it takes in half. And because of that, I feel like, yeah, I mean, who cares? Just get it over with and then make the max level experience good. I think that's really what matters in retail now. Because, like, the leveling experience is just gonna, it's never gonna be what it is in Classic. Unless they add in, like, a new expansion that has, like, 60 different levels and as much content as Classic had.
Well, it's not just the leveling in Classic, it's the fact that the game actually makes the content around you hard, makes it punishing to die, and forces you to group up with other players.
I mean, it's a huge
big
experience,
thing,
right? It takes longer to get from one zone that you're going to level in to the other than it takes to level in a full expansion for everything that we've seen in Modern WoW, right? Like, I've waited for Zeppelins, I've waited for boats longer than it'll take me to get the first 3 levels.
Taking boats.
It's just
non-mages out there.
Oh yeah, man. Oh, wait, I am a mage. Transport. Wait, I have portals? I am a mage in Classic. Worst mage. Dude, it's actually crazy because, you know, you think you're the worst mage, and then you play with that group that SFAM puts together, and I was doing more damage than everybody when I was naked. I still don't even understand how that was possible to this moment. Disgusting.
Classic WoW, like, there's something, I don't know, Ziqo, if you've had the same experience, but there are a lot of people in Classic WoW. It's a simple game, you know, in terms of the rotation. And somehow people do it wrong. Like, it's like there's one button. Just hit the one button, and they're not hitting the button. Oh, it drives me crazy, man. Like, so you played Classic for a while, Ziqo. How did you feel about the game? What made you stop playing, if you did?
Well, in the end, it was either the end game was either rank or raid log. So it was around BWL launch. I raid logged for a little bit, but 8.3 came out, and to be honest, it was mainly the arena itch kind of came back to me. I think if there was a bigger, like, dueling scene, maybe that would have kept me around a bit. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just the retail endgame is better.
Like, look, this is I actually think the most interesting thing that I think we're going to talk about on the show today is one of the reasons I was really excited to have you on the show as well. When you look at WoW right now, I guarantee some people in the chat are instantly going to jump on this. When you talk about the end game, people go, I got to do chores all day. This sucks. Oh my God, this is awful. I got to do my visions again. there's this shitty catch-up mechanic with Malefic Cores, which is not a catch-up mechanic. I'm not going to be caught up until I'm literally going to be another year older before I catch up. That's not even a joke with how it's going right now. And I don't have many good years left, let's be honest. You can tell by my hairline, time's running out.
What's going on with that?
He shaved his head for 10K subs.
You should see what I do for money. No, but hey, like at the end of the day, people complain about how much repetition there is, but they still log in and do it. Some people look at it and they say, this is way too much. I'm done. I'm going to give up. It's futile. But when you do look at Classic WoW, which I think is, look, whether or not you enjoy it or not, I think we'll all agree Classic WoW is a good game. Even if you do not like playing Classic WoW, if you played Classic WoW and you stopped, it is objectively a good game. And it's not very often that you can say that about a game. Classic WoW is objectively a good game. It still does have problems. And anybody who won't admit that it has problems is a word I can't even say right now.
Yeah.
And they're literally just drooling in the chat, right? The thing is what is better? Having that repetitive content, having the fact that you're either going to raid log or rank be the end game content, or is it somewhere in the middle? Asmon, how do you feel about that? Because I feel like this is one of the most interesting things that we can draw from Classic WoW, and then BFA, which is on the exact opposite scale, where I log in and I actually will sometimes spend like 6 hours doing world quests and chores.
Honestly, I feel like Classic WoW, I mean, you have like a lot of chores that you have to do if you want to play Classic WoW super seriously with getting all of the world buffs. So like, for example, my guild usually takes half a day off and on getting all the world buffs for themselves for the previous, or sorry, for the next day for the raid. Now, you don't really need to do that. This is obviously just something that we do because we find it fun. But for the most part, I think that Classic WoW, the enjoyment of it is being able to go into that raid. And I think that there's a certain amount of anticipation because you can only really take that chance once a week. So you go into BWL and you have that one chance every single week to get that really good piece of gear. And now with Retail WoW, for example, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a different thing, is that you have so many other chances that you can take to get gear instead. And it doesn't really have like the same sense of importance whenever you do the raid every single week. Now, at the very beginning of patches, I think that it does matter more, but there's also so much more there's so much more nuance to things that are in retail that I don't think you have like the simplistic enjoyment that people can get out of Classic WoW. And I think that's something that they've really enjoyed about it. And I've seen a lot of people playing Classic and saying that they like how simple the game is and you can just work towards a set of BIS. And I guess now with the corruption vendor, you can kind of do that too. So it's definitely a good thing, but I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Here's the problem with working towards BIS with the corruption vendor.
Yeah.
You can in a lot of ways if you're okay with 465s, right? Because let's say on Hunter, for example, so also for everybody who made fun of me for it taking me 6 to do it, I gear 5 characters. So it does take me longer because I have alts, and I understand that not everybody's gearing that many characters because most people actually enjoy and value their lives, and don't do that many times. It's kind of miserable to play alts right now, and I think that there's no surprise there. But when you actually do look at best in slot and how best in slot is going to work, you can accept 465s and get the best corruptions and get the best stats and be pretty close. But Titan Forging does exist in the game still. Whether or not people want to call it Titan Forging, when you look at the Mythic Chest, it functions the way that Titan Forging does or did with worse odds. You're in a situation where you are hoping that you are going to get the right slot of gear with the right stat weights, and then eventually you'll be able to deterministically add a socket to it, which is profoundly better than it used to be. But you are hoping for a 10 item level jump because the stat weights that you want realistically are not going to exist on every piece in Mythic. Like, I'm pretty sure on Hunter, the only Mythic piece that I wanted from the raid was the Hive Mind Ring. The Hive Mind Ring was the one I wanted. Haste crit, yeah, I wanted it really bad. One of the other options, though, is you could get really lucky and somehow get the Mechagon rings at 475, and your pets will automatically trigger it if they're standing, because they'll be standing behind the target. But that was my chase piece, was a ring. Everything else was Azerite and Skitrabo. And then after you get that, all right, we're moving on. We're hoping for good 470s out of the Visions. We're hoping for good 475s. So even though there is a BIS list in a lot of ways, when you do look at Mythic Plus, it's 465 and you can still get Titan Forges. And that's one of the reasons that I don't like the chest.
I don't know. Like, Ziqo, what do you think of the weekly chest? Like, for PvP, PvE, like everything? Just, what do you think about that?
I don't mind that there's a weekly chest and it gives you like an extra reward to look forward to. But I think the problem is if that reward is the only avenue to reliably get a best in slot piece of gear. And obviously before they added the vendor, I think that was a big problem that I had with the weekly chest. That, you know, you have to get a piece of gear and it has to corrupt and it has to be the right corruption and preferably with the right stats, preferably with a socket, preferably it won't have the wrong tier of corruption as well. So it's like, you know, it's RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG. And then the only way to minimize basically all of that RNG is to get it through your chest. So when you got something sucky in the chest, not that I would know because again, I had insane gear, but most people, they wouldn't be too happy about it, and I understand that. So I think as long as there's a good way to progress your gear, I don't mind that there is an extra way to get a little bit ahead.
It's crazy to me. It's weird whenever I think about it, but in Legion, the Mythic chest wasn't as painful because you had Titan Forging. So because you had Titan Forging, there were other ways to get gear that was equivalent to the Mythic chest. You could just go do the run again and hopefully get lucky. And it's actually funny to say that because I hate Titan Forging, but
bring it back.
Yeah, in like a weird way, it did make the Legion chest less painful. Where it's like now you have the fucking, this is your Mythic chest, and you have one chance per week to get this perfectly statted item. And like for a warrior, for any like plate DPS, it's using a two-hander, that's really important to make sure you get Gatuku. So do I have it? Fuck no. But I have every single other two-handed weapon that I've all gotten out of the chest. So I have both of the Mechagon maces, I have the Freehold sword, I have every single weapon except for Gatuku. And why is that? Pure fucking luck. And there's nothing I can do to offset that, and I only have one chance per week. It's super disappointing.
Yeah, but what if you could get a weapon that's as good from a different avenue?
That'd be great. I'd be completely fine about that. But it's just the problem is
then
that
it just wouldn't feel as bad, right?
No, and that's why it felt better in Legion, is that you could just be like, okay, well, I'll just go play the lottery and hope I get it again. And now you can't do that even. You just have your one shot for the week to get this completely unique, rare piece of gear that could make your character amazing, and the chance of you getting it is 1 in 100. It's just
doesn't feel good.
I swear the chest too, you can disagree with this and it would probably be well founded, but I truly believe one of the worst feelings about the chest too is the fact that you mentally build it up and wait for it as well. like the band-aid is automatically ripped off when you loot a boss, right? You either get it or you didn't, and you very easily go, yeah, I'll wait again until next week. And you know, it's a limited loot pool, you're looking for that one item, and you either get it or you don't. I actually think one of the things that's a little bit toxic, and I know a lot of people disagree with this, and once again, I totally understand that. These are kind of weird ideas, but I do feel like, because you're talking about just like the mental feelings that happen when things happen, not necessarily just the game itself. But when you look at bonus rolls, I think bonus rolls have some weird feelings attached to them as well, because when you roll the bonus roll, there's usually one piece that you want. And if you don't get that piece, but you still do get a side grade or an upgrade, you're like, that's not really what I wanted. Whereas if the item that you wanted didn't drop off the boss itself back in the master looting days, and the side grade did, you go, oh, at least that dropped. I'll still roll on it. And you take it and you're happy when you win it, right? Because you know that you don't have the other option. The illusion of choice isn't there. And if you have too many choices, you're going to end up being disappointed. I mean, if you go to the store and there are 800 different types of soup and you pick one, you're going to be thinking about the other, at least another 5 of the flavors of soup that were there. I eat a lot of soup. Yeah, right. You're gonna think about a few of them, right? Yeah. And be like, man, why didn't I get this flavor instead? But when you do look at the mythic chest and how it works, you wait the entire week and you go, oh man, this is the week. This is the week. I'm going to open it. And then you're kind of completely helpless. The realm of possibilities is so large. And then you get it done. You're like, damn, all right, well, I got to wait another week. I need to do something, and I'm not going to instantly get a reward for it. So it's not actually going to feel like a really positive moment once you complete that 15 or higher to get some extra residuum. And then that's that.
Yeah. I feel like that's what's happened with a lot of things. I mean, ultimately in Shadowlands, like, I'm really glad that they're adding kind of a menu of items that you can get out of your weekly chests, and I think that's going to make it much better. So, like, for example, if, like, I got the menu of 3 different weapons, the odds are I probably would have gotten Gatuku by now, and I would have been able to work towards an actual item. And I think that really the big problem I think that BFA has had overall is that so many of the systems sound very good theoretically, but the psychology behind them is really demotivating. And I think that's what's ended up happening with a ton of things. You can think about that with Azerite gear not being tradable, the removal of Master Loot, and now with the corruption gear, the box, and all of these things that theoretically should work and should make sense, but in terms of like how it actually makes a player feel, and of course I'm speaking for myself, but I think a lot of people agree with me, it doesn't feel good. And that's probably the worst part about it all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's about those moments that just used to feel good, not necessarily feeling good again. I do see a lot of people also asking like what you mean by menu when you are saying menu. And basically, to our knowledge, this hasn't been implemented in any of the alpha builds as of right now, as far as I do know. But how it's going to work is like Hearthstone, the discovery mechanic in Hearthstone, where basically 3 options pop up and you pick from one of the 3 options. So you get your chest at the end of the week, and it might be Gatuku, Balefire Branch, and a Conch. And then you go, oh, okay, I want Gatuku if you're Asmon. And then you take it, and then you move on. I am still not completely sold on that idea. I'm not the biggest advocate of the chest for multiple reasons.
I kind of like that idea.
I like the idea.
The discovery idea.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's
you get to mulligan like the dog shit loot. Like
yeah,
that.
maybe you can re-roll it, and then it only has 2 items, and then you can re-roll those 2 items again, and then you only have 1 item. That would actually be. I like that. That would be good. That would be good to do on stream.
Wait. Say that again.
So like, let's say you get
gambling content. Like that's
yeah, yeah. So you get 3 items, right? And then let's say all 3 of the items you don't like. Then you re-roll your chest, and it has 2 new items. And then you re-roll again, but you can't pick the 3 that you originally re-rolled from. And then you can re-roll again, and you only have 1.
What if, then if you don't like it, you can start betting your gear and for better rolls. So then you start betting your gear, then you can put your house up as well. Yeah. Like I'm so like I love gambling. I am the biggest degenerate on the face of the earth. I don't even know if I'm supposed to scream that. I grew up in Atlantic City. I love gambling, but when I'm gambling, I don't want to sit down at a table at a casino and be like, have it tell me that I'm not gambling. Right? Like, don't lie to me about whether I'm gambling or not.
It's like, this is an investment firm? No, bro, this is a casino.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, what are we doing here? Like, I'm gambling. Like, I just want to have my drink. I don't want anyone to pretend that I'm doing something that I've earned. It's like, oh yeah, you played so hard this week. That's why you get this currency. It's like, no, I'm on a treadmill. I'm losing everything. I'm losing all my time. I'm losing all my hair, and I'm losing everything that I have in game. And if there's going to be gambling in the game, fine, go all out with the gambling. But I'm sick of the Titanic residuum pretending that it's an actual reward at the end of the week. That is the worst feeling currency that I think has ever been in WoW. It's like, go ahead.
Do you still gamble with that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's stream content. Like, to
me,
do
you need anything you can get with it?
The
radios are just superior.
I play
all my newer characters. Yeah, my alts. It's really important. Yeah. It's mostly for alts right now.
Yeah.
And then there are some pieces that I feel like on a lot of classes there might be like maybe one piece that you would rather roll off of that for like maybe a Mythic Plus than in the raid. But raid pieces in a lot of ways are superior because like actually the Heart of Darkness trait's pretty good for a lot of different classes now, which is nice. I actually do like that as far as Azerite goes. It's one of those things that I don't talk about very often though, because I'm just hoping that there's nothing like Azerite really left in the game. I would much rather see things function as a secondary progression system the way that corruptions do now. I actually think that it's kind of healthy for the game. But I mean, when you actually look at the laundry list of issues that we had with corruptions, with Azerite gear, we forget what it was like at the beginning of the expansion. Do you remember when you would get an upgrade with Azerite gear, but you couldn't access all the rings? And like stuff like that was And I also remember when it first came out, Ziqo posted a picture. It was like he was like reforging his gear, and it was like 10 million gold to like reforge.
Oh, jeez.
He was switching between Arcane and Fire all the time for Arena.
Well,
it was bad. It went up to like 600k, like 700k.
I feel like that's one thing I still don't understand. Like the Azerite gear and the way that it works, and having the pieces of Azerite gear just not work with all specs. I don't get it. And like so now you have to have like 3 or 4 different helmets in the game, like carrying with you all the time if you want to switch specs. And now we have corruptions too. So you have like, Ziqo, I'm pretty sure you probably do the same thing I do. You have probably like 6 different pieces of gear in your bags with all the different corruption for each different slot. Yeah, I do the same fucking thing because who knows, maybe they might nerf it or maybe they might buff it. So you're just holding on to everything, and everybody is a pack rat. Like for me, it used to be just me. Like I was the only person with full inventory, but now everybody has full inventory. And you never know what you might need. It's like, oh, well, maybe I might need to use this, or I might need to use that.
Yep.
You never know.
But I feel like that's a deeper problem, though. Like, how do you guys actually feel about the fact that? How do you guys feel about getting spells and getting like damage procs and getting basically new abilities?
Yeah.
After you're done leveling and you're getting that on your gear, how do you guys feel about that as a concept?
I think
that's leveling and getting your skills, and then you're done with that.
I feel like something like that would be cool.
That makes your skills better. Like classic.
So you're talking about basically essences, right?
Yeah, like essences, like corruptions as well. Things like Azerite. Anything that makes your character, your skills basically behave differently or get additional skills.
I don't know. I'd actually really kind of like to see that. I mean, I'd like to see something like that, but the problem is if they did too much of it, it might be frustrating for people. It's kind of like the same like borrowed power issue that people have with like getting the gear or some sort of a spell or ability from an item and then losing it, so that item is basically locked down for the whole expansion. So I'm not sure exactly how to do that better, but I think the idea is really cool. And overall, I mean, a lot of the max level player progression stuff I think is great. But the problem that I think comes in is whenever you have to do it on every single character. Every single character is really that's the real issue to me, at least.
So you think if we still had Azerite in Shadowlands and like essences and stuff, but and the cloak as well, for example, like maybe not exactly those systems, but like something similar to that. If we had that, but only your main warrior, needed to do it, and then everything else was just automatically unlocked. You would like that?
Yeah, that'd be all right. I mean, like, because it would give you something to do. It'd give you something to work towards as your max level. Because if they just make gear, which is what Ian said in Shadowlands, if they do that, then you're going to have something else that your character's going to have to work towards in one way or another. And going from BF8 that has too many systems into Shadowlands, which might not have nearly as many, I do think there could be an issue where people just feel like they're very bored once they get to max level because they don't have these systems to play with. And Legion, I think, did a much better job about having max level systems that weren't necessarily just these like overbearing burdens that you had to deal with all the time that just throttled your character back. I felt much more able to take advantage of things in Legion on my alts rather than BFA. And I think essences and corruptions are just like, it's like too many steps.
It's actually wild because I look at so many classes right now and what's happening with the corruptions, and you go, this is unique. This is probably something that we won't see again, at least 1-to-1 in the game. I want to try it. You look at Hunter and you go, wow, this looks broken. It's the most mobile thing ever. It has 100% uptime on its cooldowns. You look at a Fire Mage and you go, wow, the combustion window is one of the most overpowered things I've ever seen in the entire game. And you go, okay, I want to play the game. And then the game just tells you you can't. Like why are you trying? Like the game laughs at you for trying to play. I mean, you get to the point. I've talked about this before, but one of the things with the Hunter was the whole reason I started playing the Hunter was because I was like, okay, I am starting a fresh character. Let's see how much work I can get done on a character in a fixed amount of time. And I got all of the way to the end. And right now my Hunter, it's going to get more this week, but it had 56 resistance on its cloak after all of that playing it 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
I have all of the corruptions already bought because I farmed so many echoes. They're sitting in my bags. Every single corruption that I need is sitting in my bags, but I can't put it on my gear because I just don't have the resistance to do it. And now, obviously, my character got there late, but should you be time gated with something like that, or should you be able to play the game and catch up to other people based off of the merit that you put into the game? I'm not saying that the game should require people to play 14 hours a day. I definitely am not saying that. But in Classic, if you just came to Classic and you were a good player and you played a whole bunch, you'd be able to catch up. It wouldn't be impossible to do. There wouldn't be a fixed amount of time that would make it impossible to do. And I'm just kind of curious how people feel about that, because for me, that's been a big frustration because I actually am powerless. I have to wait each week. I can go in, mindlessly get the 2 cores. Like, it's not difficult for me to get the 2 cores. It's not like I have to play out of my mind. Could you imagine wiping in a 5-mask solo vision at this point in the game? You would have to be, you'd have to be an arcane. You'd have to be, I don't know, something would have to be wrong with you to wipe in a 5-mask vision, especially if it was in Ogremar, right? I mean, that's the easiest one, dude. That's the easiest one by far.
Sure is.
Sure, I agree.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, sure, dude.
Yeah.
Asmon died in a 5-mask mission a few days ago, Ziqo. It wasn't his fault.
This is a game.
I need a bit more context here. As a warrior?
As a warrior, yeah.
Fury warrior.
With high item level? A Fury warrior.
Yep, almost 480 item level.
It was a trash pack that he didn't have to kill outside of Rexar's boss.
It's pretty impressive, honestly. Like I
Wait,
feel like
trash?
It wasn't even trash that he needed to kill. He already killed Rexar, dude.
Okay, maybe you are the Guild Reaper, man.
I don't know.
You are the true Guild Reaper.
I don't know how it happened. I honestly think it's more impressive that I died than if I had actually completed it myself, you know?
Dude, I don't even know why you pulled the trash.
What? Say what?
I don't know why you pulled that trash.
Because I had to get to the totem that would allow me to port away.
Yeah. Okay. So so you did kind of need to kill it. I actually thought it was just completely extra trash. I didn't even realize it was blocking the totem. It was pretty funny, but it was one of those things though as well. And I'm curious how you guys feel about this, because in all seriousness, that does happen. It's fun to joke around and make fun of your friends when stuff like that happens to them, but there are some weird mechanics, and I like Visions a lot. I'm not being hypercritical of Visions by any means right now. But when you do look at how a lot of the stuff is designed inside of the Visions, it feels like the goal is to make them as annoying as possible and not as challenging as possible. Like so many of the
some of the affixes, man. Like the one that knocks you. I hate that one.
The fire one that like, shoots you across. It's like, what even is that?
Just pulls you into a bag, just sucks you in. Like, why?
Well, like I like the one that lets you. It's like you have to jump every once in a while, or like you get forced into running.
Yeah.
I like that one. And there's a few other ones that I think are good, but there are, in general, I don't like it whenever things make you lose control of your character. So, like, the thing where it spawns around you and then you have to like, move out of it. I hate that one, man.
Whatever.
It's super annoying. Yeah, split personality, exactly. Because it's like
the burrowers, dude, like, they're not hard. Like, that's the thing. They're not hard to deal with at all. And I don't think anybody's going to say that they're hard. But
Yeah.
it's so annoying. Like, it's just actually annoying.
It
Like,
takes so long to do it. Even now, when you have gear, it takes like 20 minutes to do it.
it's like where they literally go underground. They're like little diglets. They're little tentacle diglets.
Have you noticed that they bug out? Maybe you guys haven't noticed because you played melee, but on range, when they like come back up, if you're too far away, you can't do damage to them. They're immune to damage for like a couple of seconds, and then as they go back down, you can do damage to them.
Oh yeah, I've had my Reaping Flames just get immune.
It just doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah,
and it just puts it on max CD.
I don't know, man. Like the burrowers that go up and down, like those are super annoying. And then if they knock you up in the air, then you have like the other thing that appears down beneath you, and like you stand in that. Oh, it's super obnoxious. Like, I like the idea of like the vision buffs, but there are some of them that just create very frustrating situations. I think that the one that I really don't like most of all is split personality, because you have all of these monsters that knock you back, and they have like these things that you have to move out of, and then split personality is happening at the same time. So you have this thing that you have to move out of while at the same time you're getting knocked back into it. It's just like, okay, dude.
Split personality is the circle with the one person walk out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That one, it doesn't go with so many of the other mechanics in a weird way. Like, I think that the mechanic's kind of cool, right? Like, I understand why it's there. Like, the idea of being like, oh no, this thing's popping up. But then even with how it interacts with sanity loss, with the way that it's purple on the edges of the screen, it becomes really illegible. You don't know how much time you really have, so you can't predict movement. And like Asmon said, you're going to get knocked back and things like that. It's a cool idea. It doesn't really seem like it works.
The worst one is when those mobs that grip you, and you're getting it at the same time, and it pops, and then the mob grips you, and you get gripped and stunned at the same time.
Yeah.
And then it'll stun you again. I mean, that's actually how Asmon died. Like, all jokes aside.
Wait, really?
Like,
I got knocked
Asmon
into
got
the
chain
split personality.
CC'd.
I got knocked into split personality, and then I got stunned because I was knocked back into it, and then the stun like just killed me. Like, that's pretty much what happened. It's very frustrating to have that happen, and just generally things that make you lose control of your character. Like, that's especially whenever you can chain them together like that by making a mistake. It's not very fun. But overall, I mean, it's kind of a mistake. And outside of that one ability, I think most of the other vision things are okay. But I agree with you. I don't like the red one either.
I actually I do like visions.
Yeah.
I've said that quite a few times. I think they feel a little bit repetitive after a while, but what doesn't? I feel like it's a fair criticism to say that's repetitive after a while, but you get to that point with everything. I just think the catch up, the way that the catch up actually works with it is probably the bigger failure. I think that console progression and cloak progression should just be account wide. I think that would take away from quite a bit of it. How do you feel about the 470 each week for 5 masking? Because personally, I'm actually, even though there's a lot of RNG with it, I'm kind of fine with it, with the idea of just getting a 470 out of a chest each week.
I don't mind it. I think extra avenues to get something like that, it's welcome, and I think it's also kind of nice that you can get, there's a small chance, but like this is also what I mean with like the chest thing, that if you have several avenues to get something, it doesn't feel as bad. I think that applies here as well, because you can get an item and it can have, in my case, like haste, Versa, and like whatever corruption that you want, like Versa amp or whatever. And if you don't get it, well, it's not that big of a deal. You can still go and get a different item with those stats and then just slap a Versa amp on it anyway. So I think that it just has a chance of reducing how much you have to farm, basically. So it's not a bad thing.
It's more of like kind of the guaranteed gear. So like whenever you're playing WoW right now, you have like your guaranteed item that you get from your box, your base box. Then every other week, if you're doing 15s, you have your guaranteed Azurite piece. Then you also have your guaranteed item from your PvP box, and then you have your guaranteed item from Visions too. So you have so many of these guaranteed items that, like 3 or 4 weeks into the patch, you're probably going to fill at least over half of your slots with these guaranteed items.
Yeah.
Especially if you have the profession gear. So it makes it I think that's one thing that Blizzard does really need to work on going into Shadowlands, is making gear more of a progression rather than kind of you make. This is the problem with Diablo 3, for example, is that in Diablo 3 you make 90% of your progress in 10% of your time, and then you make the other 90% of your time getting 10%, the last 10% of your progress. And it's not really as enjoyable, I think, because there's no other types of like gear modification that you can really deal with. And like now you do have the sockets and you have the corruptions, which I think are really good, but the problem is that the base gear is still a problem.
Well, I think what do you guys think about this?
Okay.
If you could put, let's say, 5 different corruptions on the same item, like not active at the same time, but you could buff an item with like a gushing, a versa amp, a haste amp, for example, and then you could select which one you want to be active. You think that would make it better? Because then you would have to farm, you wouldn't have to farm 2 items, for example, if you want to have like a defensive and an offensive set.
I think they need to do that in general. Like the problem with that is that like there's so much shit. Yes, that would be fucking amazing. Like the idea of carrying around a dozen different items for like each different slot or half a dozen different items is a really big issue. And just in terms of like characters not knowing what they should have, and then apparently people will vendor them, and then they need to use the item restoration service, and then that's more work for Blizzard. So it's actually like probably causing them more money and more time having to deal with this kind of stuff. And I think that's functionally what's happened, is that you have so many of these systems that are just kind of on top of each other that it's overwhelming. And then you have so many different pieces of gear that you have to keep up with, like what you're saying. Like, oh my fucking God, dude. Like I'm, as I said, on a good day, I have 10 open slots in my bag. 10 open slots.
Saying that like the idea of that gets me fully torqued. The amount of items I've been carrying around for such a long time. I think Ziqo, like there are a lot of different ways that they probably could have done a system like that. But what you said is like the problem is definitely there, and a solution needs to happen. I definitely think that would be a decent solution. I do want to say right now, though, I kind of want to start to switch our attention over to everything that's going on in the alpha, because there is a lot going on there right now. Before that, though, Ziqo, I do want to ask you, if you could keep anything from BFA, what would it be? Are there any big ideas from BFA where you're like, wow, I actually do want to keep this?
Let me think. Like a system, you mean, or just anything?
Anything that you think is important to have.
I don't know. I like the idea of being able to grind a currency to be able to socket your gear, and I like the idea that what they've started to do with some of the gear is that you can get a piece of gear and then you can like slowly upgrade it. I think those systems are cool. And then obviously the game itself has like a ton of different things that they always just deliver on, like the graphics and the raid design and things like that. But as like a general thing, I think the idea of having an item and making it better and better is also a way to reduce, getting unlucky, essentially. So I think that's a good thing that they should try to keep.
I mean, there's a few things that I like about BFA. I like essences if they were completely account-wide, like wholesale. The necklace is 100% account-wide. And I'd like the idea of being able to choose different essences in terms of your major essence. Now, the minor essences and how those work, I'm not as happy about, because it's like they're usually just random stat procs and stuff like that, and it's not as interesting. But I do really like the major essence. I think that's great.
To be honest, I'm more old school, man. Like I like having a complex talent tree and leveling and getting most of your skills through leveling, and then if you get one or two things later on, it's not the end of the world. But I feel like most of your like actual ability progression should come just by being max level. And then I feel like I like when gear, like in classic, basically makes your abilities hit harder. It makes your character stronger, essentially. I love that, because it feels
I feel like the thing is corruption. The reason corruption felt good in a lot of ways was because it felt super end game. Like, if corruption existed in the entirety of the expansion, it would be stupid, right? I think like it really wouldn't work. So, how do you feel about the last patches, the later patches, really having the big spike in performance that we saw here? Because you basically deleted any stat squish once you added corruptions into the game. It was like 30k to 130k. Like, it was actually wild with corruptions there. Do you ever like having a spike that big that's outside of power gain from leveling?
Well, I think with like speaking specifically from a PvP standpoint, because I'm not that much of a raider, so I don't want to talk about that. From a PvP standpoint, I feel like they definitely add an extra flavor and a different way to kind of close games, which I'm not against. What I'm against is essentially that I feel like the corruption versus how much your ability does, it's a little bit off. With that said, though, I do think in BFA specifically, it was a net positive adding them because the pacing was just super slow, and this is something that will just increase the pacing overall.
Do you think the versatility nerf is going to make the pacing for PvP better now?
In competitive or just on ladder?
Both.
On ladder, I think definitely we're going to see. I think on ladder, we're going to start to see some of the fastest games because I think people at home, they don't want to play long, boring matches. They want to play, they want to go crazy, go max out gushing wounds or go max out, mastery or, whatever, and just try to one-shot people. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that come up with builds like that are later, other people later will start to abuse. I think we're going to see some things get nerfed as well that people are starting to abuse. So I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely seeing it be a little bit better now in terms of, like, since now everybody's gotten the option to probably get at least one corruption that they actually need, you're seeing things kind of balance out because I think before people were just pretty much only gearing for PvP. Or, sorry, for survivability.
Yeah, but in competitive, I think it's just the same issues there, with the certain classes, monks, and obviously this patch did target them a bit, but I think overall it's not going to matter too much because you have like Mage Lock Monk going super late and dampening, and they're still going to gear defensively and do everything as defensive as possible. And at that point you can't really hate the player because they're just trying to win, right? And if that's their best way of winning, then that's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about the alpha. A bunch of stuff's gotten added. Ziqo, I'm kind of curious, how much have you actually jumped on? I mean, obviously you competed in some of the early duel tournaments that have popped up and things like that, but how much time have you been spending on the alpha?
To be honest, not that much. I played, I did a little bit of leveling when 54, I think, was the max. Do you believe 53 or 54? And when Torghast got added, I did an entire Torghast, of course. I did it on a couple of classes, and I made every single class to just kind of look at the toolkit that they have. Aside from that, though, I haven't experienced really like the later stuff that's been added, like the updated Torghast and everything like that.
Dude,
so it's been a while.
I want to say one thing. Some of the Covenant abilities are some of the coolest abilities that have ever been added to the game. They are fucking awesome.
Too bad we can only have one of them.
Yeah! They're so good!
Yeah. Well,
they
how
are
do I feel about it?
So good.
I wrote an essay about how I felt about it. Like that's really what it is. I'm very frustrated about that, honestly. Like the Covenants, I feel like are the. Let me ask you something. What do you think the odds are of there being a best PvP Covenant that 80% of the PvPers go for?
Only 80%? I feel like it's going to be a little bit higher than that.
Yeah.
I think the odds of that happening are extremely high. And I would even argue that the odds of that happening and then that PvP Covenant getting nerfed is pretty high as well. And what I want to know is what happens at that point. Because right now, if you put Versa amps on all your gear and Versa amp got nerfed, the way I see it, that's just, that's tough luck.
that was like the problem with so many of those things. I mean, how many people bought a piece of gear for corruption on it, and then the corruption gets nerfed, right? Or they buy a piece of like some of that BOE stuff.
I did
was
that
pretty
within
rough.
5 minutes. I bought a tier 3 Twilight Devastation shield, and literally 5 minutes later they nerfed Twilight Devastation. 5 minutes later, and I no, it's okay though. I'm all right with that because I went and this other guy wanted to sell me 2 Gushing Wounds items for 2.3 million gold, and I was strongly considering it. And I said, you know what, man? Maybe they might change it. Maybe they might add a vendor, and they added a fucking vendor, and I saved my money. So I'm gonna consider this. I broke even.
You know what? I had 5 gushings, and I wanted to go all out. You know, I was like, this is it. We grind now, and then we can retire until Shadowlands. We can just make an alt. Like we're not gonna play a single game after this. Yeah. I wanted to get 2 more BOEs with gushing, a 475 ring with gushing, and I wanted to get. I already bought the alpha, and I wanted to get the legs as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I started farming gold. Started farming. I farmed like 10, 12 million gold. So I wanted to have 7 gushing in total, right?
Yeah.
And the week when I finally am done and I'm about to buy it, I'm starting to hear rumors, you know, might get nerfed. And all of a sudden, vendor gets added. So I'm like, dang. So I spent it all on buying Mythic and Ny'alotha carry instead. But that was a close call, you know?
You both came out on the right side of history. I came out on the wrong side. I spent all of my gold on a bunch of BOEs right when I came back, and then the vendor got added the next week, and I bought a bunch of WoW tokens to do it, and everybody started making fun of me saying $10 per 100 DPS.
Something like that.
It didn't feel good. It really did not feel good. But I think the other thing that could not feel good when we're looking ahead at this pay to win, yeah, true. But when we're actually looking at everything that's going to be coming out in Shadowlands, I think one of the worst feeling situations that could happen is seeing some of these overpowered abilities and then not being able to use them.
Speaking of Shadowlands, listen to this. 9.0 PvP power spell added in Shadowlands Alpha. A 9.0 PvP power spell has been added into Shadowlands Alpha, which increases your primary stat by an amount equal to your PvP power. So it looks like we're getting it back. We're actually going to get a PvP stat back.
I think it's actually a good thing, though.
Ago. You think so?
I think it's a net positive because one of my biggest concerns with PvP gear right now is that it sucks. All of the gear from PvP, like there's maybe 1 or maybe 2. Actually, there's 2 items as a mage, offhand with haste versa, and then there's a ring. That's it. All the other gear sucks. Every time you open your weekly box, what do you get? Sucky items. You get Battle Master trinkets, Gladiator Breach, shitty Azurite pieces. It's all getting vendored at the Scrap Master. That's it.
Yeah.
So if there is a PvP specific power, then it feels like that gear, for the most part, is going to be better than the PvE equivalent, except usually for trinkets, because usually the trinkets doesn't have the stat on it, and you want to go for something that comes from a raid. So I think that's good. A net positive for sure.
Dude,
and how they balance it, that's a different story, you know?
Blood Elf females also got new bracelets and necklaces. I don't know if anybody else cares about that.
I feel a little bit discriminated against. I mean, you see, like, all the female options are fucking awesome. And the male options, we get like, oh yeah, now you can do your hair in like a stupid ass thing on the side.
Hey, now you can be more bald. Did you notice that they added 8 bald haircuts for dudes, and then all of the girl characters got like all this crazy awesome stuff. You know what I will say though, the best race in the game now, as far as like customization, in my opinion, I've never felt this way before. The new Undead might be the best race in the game. Period.
I hate the animations. I'm never using it.
No, okay, nobody's agreeing with me. But I actually think the new Undead, dude, you can change your eye color, dude. You can do pink hair with green eyes.
You're dead. You shouldn't even have eyes.
You can choose that as well.
Actually, that's true. Yeah,
it's actually a choice. It's actually so good. You can do that with Blood Elves, yes, but the Undead eyes are cooler. It's actually really like the new customizations are really awesome.
Yeah.
I know this is such a small thing to so many people. I actually saw a tweet though at the Wowhead Twitter, and I was like, wow, this guy's a 5-head. Whoever tweeted it at them. So they added new class animations to the character creation screen. So like if you're a priest, like you're floating in the air and you're surrounded by the light. If you're a mage, I'm assuming you do some like chromy shit, you know. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I think that this is still data mined. I'm not 100% sure because it came out an hour and 34 minutes ago. I haven't jumped on to actually see what the new alpha build does have. That is really cool. I saw a bunch of people tweeting at the Wowhead tweet that was talking about that, being like, should we have this on the actual character selection screen, not just on the character creation screen? Do you guys think that there's any merit into slightly updating the character selection screen that we've had for a long time, or do you think that nostalgia might kick in and people might get pissed?
They've made a lot of changes already. I mean, like I've made like a couple of like test characters to see like what the coolest combinations are, and it looks very, very different from vanilla WoW. I'll say that for sure. And
From on character selection though?
Oh, character select?
Yeah. I'm talking about character selection. Character creation is completely different already, and I will say that the UI is objectively better, in my opinion. The only thing that's missing is a titty slider. The second that gets added, the game is 100% saved. Best expansion.
We've been waiting for a while for that. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think the character selection screen really matters that much. Like, if they did, like, maybe a rotation where you could see all your characters and you could rotate them around, like I don't know, like a rotary device or something, like, that would be kind of cool. But
oh my god, if you had a gang shot where just like you had all your characters standing next to each other, that would actually be so cool.
Yeah, they put them up like an album cover.
Yeah, literally
exactly.
Or
like a fighting game where you get to like, you know, choose your fighter and you've got all the different ones. I don't know. That would be really cool to have. I don't know. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, there are a lot of options Blizzard could go with to make it more interesting. But I don't really think, like, the way I look at it is that if the game sucks, you're just polishing a turd at that point. Like, who really, like, at the end of the day, who really cares about that? The game needs to get the game needs to be good in Shadowlands. That's what I care about.
Yeah.
Like, I want the raid to be fun. I'm really excited about the new raid in Shadowlands. I think it's gonna be, like, coming from somebody like I just got done watching the Castlevania Netflix series recently, and so good. Like now, like getting ready for that raid. Oh man, dude, I'm so ready for it. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, it looks real. All of the zones have, I don't know, Asmon, how many of the dungeons have you done? Have you done all of them?
I've done one dungeon.
Dude, the Ardenwald one is actually hilarious. So for anybody who hasn't seen the Ardenwald dungeon yet, you go into this dungeon. It's this big open night fair area that actually looks really good. Like, it's one of the best looking dungeons I think we've seen in a little while. And you run in and you get to this one boss, and it's this lost forest kind of like throwback to Legend of Zelda vibe. And you have to do a puzzle to get through this mist. And then when you get to the boss, she does all these really weird puzzle things that you actually have to solve. Spoilers? Are spoilers a thing? Or am I getting...
Look, I haven't done any of the dungeons, and I'd be lying if I didn't say part of it was because of spoilers. Like, I like going in...
Wait, did I just ruin the game for everybody? I'm actually so sorry.
No, Blizzard already did
I haven't done them either, by the way, for the record, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
I don't need to worry about it. I'm not that stressed, but still, like, yeah, I would like to... I like to do all of it for the first time whenever it comes out. I think that's kind of like the most exciting thing. But yeah, I mean, the new dungeons, from what I've seen, look really good. Like, all of the thing, like, as I said before, like, I was so worried. I'm still so worried that it's like with Shadowlands, I'm waiting for, like, what's the catch? Like, there's something, like, it's like, are we going to have to... Go ahead.
What do you think of it in general? Like, right now, in your level of excitement, what would you say? Like, are you like a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10, a 10 out of 10?
Okay, so like obviously I'm really excited because it's a WoW expansion, but in terms of the context of it being Shadowlands, I would say like a 7, like a 7.5 or an 8, and overall like a 9. Like, I'm very excited for the expansion to come out, but a lot of that is just because I want more mounts to farm. Okay, like I want more pets to collect and you know, more bosses to do and stuff like that, more raids to do, and like that's going to be the main thing. But the content and like the story of Shadowlands, I feel like is compelling, And that's something that we haven't really seen happen in a long time, is actually have a compelling story. I feel like the BFA storyline just didn't really, I don't know. There was just something missing. Like, I don't know, Ziqo, do you pay attention to the lore at all?
I mean, honestly, just what Novel puts out,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
BFA lost me completely. In Legion, even I was like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
I did kind of like Argus though.
Argus had some cool cutscenes, right?
Yeah, it had cool cutscenes. It didn't mean a damn thing. Like, I was waiting. Like,
that's cool cutscenes. Yeah.
We have Sargeras. Like, we finally captured this dude after 10 years, and like for them, it's like 10,000 years of them dealing with this asshole, and then finally, we get him, and we just port him down. He sit him down in a chair, and we leave. We're like, all right, dude, I'll see you later. Like,
yeah, isn't he like in?
Isn't
he the ultimate like bad boss? Isn't he like Sauron basically?
Okay,
he's like Malkor.
Yeah, so as far as the ultimate bad guys go, we don't even know who the ultimate bad guy is, right? Like Sargeras is kind of like, he's just like an emo kid, right? He draws his conclusions in a way that make him a bad guy, but he's trying to be a good guy type thing. They basically rewrote him to be Arthas in a lot of ways, except on a cosmic scale. He's fighting the demons at first. Then he actually finds out that the true evil is the old gods. He's trying to save all of the little Titan babies. He comes to the conclusion that if Azeroth ultimately is infected by the old gods, which come from the void, basically the old gods are just whatever junk they can pump out of the void, right? This is just the crappy shit they can shoot out, because getting through the void into our realm of reality, it's not an easy transition to go through. So they just spew out the old gods. They're intergalactic STDs. They throw them down, but that's how the void is attempting to get influence over the nascent Titan egg, because we live on a Titan. Sargeras goes, if that existed, the all reality could end. It would be the most powerful being ever. His conclusion, instead of trying to get it some stardust penicillin, is let's just destroy the entire planet. And that is where he actually goes, takes the demons that he had previously fought against, creates an army out of them to wage war and destroy this planet. That's why Ashara actually tries to suck him through. So he's pretty bad, but the actual bad guys still are the things that he was going against. He just went against us as well to get to that bad guy, but the ultimate bad guy is the Void and the Void Lords.
Sargeras is like, he's doing whatever it takes. He's kind of like Illidan in a way. Like, Sargeras is kind of like Illidan. He'll do bad things for good, for an ultimate good outcome. And I think that they did kind of, because I remember whenever I first learned about Sargeras, I don't know if they just changed the lore or I didn't know as much about it back then, but I just remember Sargeras being basically corrupted by the Dreadlords, the Nathrazim, and then just becoming evil. And like, that was it. He was just becoming evil. And
it got retconned with Chronicle.
Yeah, they retconned basically what it was. And they turned Sargeras into being kind of like a neutral force that just wanted to, he was doing the right thing in a bad way. And I like that idea. I think it's an interesting idea. And it makes me think that we're probably going to see Sargeras later on, a couple of expansions from now. Sargeras and Illidan coming back to help us stop the Void Lords. But right now, the Void Lords are kind of like they are the main, like, pure evil force. Now, is Sargeras more powerful than the Void Lords? I would assume probably collectively the Void Lords are more powerful because there's a lot of them, but Sargeras is probably more powerful than one of them individually, something like that. So I don't really know.
Okay, so Sargeras, he's like a great white whale shark, right? And the Void Lords are like a bunch of small little orcas.
I'm searching great white whale shark out.
Well, it's really big, Rich.
Is that right?
It's a really big one.
Okay, and what did Rich say? The Void.
Wait, but these aren't dangerous.
Wait, what? No, you should go and pet one. It's
okay. Well, anyway, the Sargeras is it's. I don't know. Like, I was happy with what they did with Legion. I was just disappointed with the final cinematic. Everything else with Legion I thought was fucking awesome. Like, the Illidan cinematic was awesome. The Kill Jaden cinematic was awesome. It was just that one thing that I wasn't really a big fan of. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that the lore matters, but
it does.
I already feel more compelled by the Shadowlands lore than I did with the BFA lore. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
I do want to say Sargeras is not a whale shark.
A great white shark, sorry.
Oh, a great white. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's a little bit different. Yeah, whale sharks are
Wait, is there a thing called whale sharks?
Yes, they're what I thought that they are.
They're actually feeders. You know, like the whale sharks in Vashir, right?
Yeah, they're
that shit is real, dude.
That's based on a real thing.
It's not based on a real thing. It is a real thing.
Yeah, they're bottom feeders, just like the music industry that's DMCA. We know that they're definitely real. But I think that when you actually do look at what is going on with the story, I think that the lore can be a means of reward in and of itself. It's not necessarily something that's going to keep you playing forever. But I go back to Wrath of the Lich King quite a few times and talk about that idea of, dude, the Lich King taunted you. He's just like, yo, you're a bitch. You got no gear. He's like, look at me, dude. I'm the Lich King. And he popped up in dungeons. He popped up when you were questing. And I was just like, dude, this guy stinks. I want to kill him as much as possible. And you couldn't quit because you slowly were getting there. You were getting closer and closer. And even how the raids worked, that was always in the back of your mind. I did not care about the lore at all until the Lich King happened. Right? Until Wrath of the Lich King happened, all of a sudden I was like, wait, I want to know more about what's actually going on in this world. And that's when I started to really watch some of these lore videos and really became a big fan.
Same here.
Yeah, and when I beat the Lich King, it's to this day one of the best moments that's ever happened to me in my entire life. That's not just because of the loot I got. I can't actually tell you if I got any loot when it did happen. But I was there with a bunch of people who I had progressed throughout the entirety of the expansion, and I finally did it. The thing that you made in your own head, which was killing the Lich King being the most important thing to you. So I think that having the bad guy on the box, having the bad guy taunt you throughout the entirety of the expansion is important. And I think that WoW, too many times, guys, don't talk about Invincible. It's not even funny at this point. It's a statistical anomaly that I don't have Invincible right now. Yeah. But when you actually just get down to business with it, I feel like one of the things that World of Warcraft does too frequently with story is they find an arc that works and then they just repeat the arc. Even with Sargeras, right? All of a sudden, every character needs to be the misunderstood good guy. You know, it's he's the chaotic.
Why do you make a pure like asshole? You know, it's always want to hate, but like
Gul'dan's an asshole. There's no redeeming qualities about Gul'dan. Gul'dan's just a dickhead.
But what wasn't he?
He's also the biggest loser in World of Warcraft history. Multiple timelines.
He's been resurrected and brought in from another timeline to lose again. He was losing in his
whenever he's an asshole, he's the guy to call.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, Gul'dan and I don't know. I feel like that's probably the only main one. Besides, like, Ny'alotha or something like that.
Ny'alotha is literally made of dicks. Talking about being a dick. But when you look at the Void Lords, I think that's one of the reasons that some of those storylines are so exciting, because you can have a bad guy on the box. I think BFA had the potential to be a really cool expansion in a lot of ways if you cut out all of the Horde versus Alliance war things that we keep going back to that are boring. It seemed like a lot of that stuff existed just to make sure that islands fit in the game. It was like, what is going on?
I like the idea of BFA.
Was on the box.
I don't know. I thought the idea of BFA was cool. Like the idea of, you have the two factions that are fighting against each other, and then there's some greater threat that's looming and building up power throughout the entire expansion, and then that power finally reaches a crescendo at the end or towards the middle, and then it reveals itself. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, where
I was just thinking about the Night King.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem
the ending was just as disappointing.
Yeah, I was about to say the problem is that the storyline went downhill the same exact way. Yeah.
I don't disagree, but you look at how good stories like this are actually told.
Yeah.
And look, video games are a very different media. Now, a bunch of people are going to start calling me a weeb here, but that's why anime is genuinely different than a lot of other types of shows, right? Like the way that they go about telling the story is different. I mean, that is just an objective fact. They can go from, okay, I get it. I'm a weeb. I get it. I'm actually just a man of culture. The thing is, when you look at it, they can go for a much slower, methodical buildup, and you can build a lot of different character stories with things like that. And also, like Asmon said, you can actually build a world where you feel what it's like for the average human who exists in this reality to have that war going on. Because yes, it made sense for a war. We were all in space fighting space monsters, and then we came back, and of course there's going to be wars over lands. I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And I do agree with it, but they didn't have enough time to actually build up the crescendo. And I just think that if you cut back the grand scale of things with it, and you just had some big beefy tentacles on the box, and it was just like N'alotha, like just like the old gods strike back on the box.
Yeah,
you got down to business, and maybe the pre-patch was those warring factions, and when you got to the actual raid, it was the Black Empire, and the daily quests were in the Black Empire, because that raid looks incredible and it feels completely wasted at the very end. So I would have liked to see a thing like that, and instead of having these abstract ideas, which the game didn't tell very well in story, I'd rather have just the in-your-face, like, yo, look at this. This is metal as hell. This is the old gods. This is Lovecraft. It's in your face. You got to beat it.
I think that you're right about that. I mean, while they've tried to tell a more subtle story with BFA, and it didn't work. Like, let's just go with a big, badass boss that you've got to beat, and that's it. I think I'd prefer that, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, look, this is going to happen. I mean, it doesn't matter how long you write stories for. It doesn't matter what the medium that you're actually writing the story in. Sometimes you're not going to write a perfect story, and sometimes you're going to write stuff that's just useless. I used to write poems to try to get chicks to make out with me, right? Like, people write bad stuff when they're writers. It just happens. And you just have to move on, and you have to say, okay, this didn't work within the confines of what I'm writing right now. It didn't achieve the goal, like writing poems to try to make girls like you. It just didn't achieve the goal. So what do? We scale back the story. We make it more relatable. We make it so cutscenes can actually tell the story. We make it so the bosses themselves actually convey that story. And we make it feel the way that something like Lich King potentially did when it was a looming threat that you built up to, and you had that catharsis when you actually got him down. That would be something that I would really like to see in the Shadowlands. And I actually look at Covenants, and for all of the weaknesses, which we do point out time and time again, I think that the strength might actually lie in the way that it does tell the story, because it's going to make the story a reward. And if things pan out in the Ludo elements, as well as in the narrative elements that we're seeing with the system, maybe you want to play 4 different characters to actually experience all the different Covenants. And I think that that is something that is potentially exciting. It's not something that every player is going to want to do, but for the player who does do it, they'll feel a reward that other players don't feel.
I don't know. I feel like, as I said, the most important thing to me is like the lore and all of that. I didn't like whenever Ulduar came out, for example, I didn't care about the Ulduar lore at all. I just thought this is just a pointless distraction. I just want to kill the Lich King. That's it. And to me,
What?
I care about Ulduar. The lore?
What, the raid?
The raid was awesome. That's what I was about to say.
Okay.
Is I didn't even give a shit about like the lore. I was like, who cares about this old god? Leave him there. It doesn't matter. Whatever. Right? I didn't understand like what the hell was going on anyway. So I just thought to myself, let's just get back to the Lich King. Let's get back to the main plot. And you know, that was what I cared about. Now, I guess for some people it would matter a little bit more, like based off of what they enjoy, but I think that what really matters is the gameplay. Like, it's the fundamental gameplay. And I was disappointed, like, obviously BFA was built up to be like a faction conflict expansion, and I don't know, I feel like from a PvP element, it didn't really fit that. I don't know, Ziqo, what do you think? Like, do you feel like it really kind of captured the idea of like a faction conflict more so than, let's say, Classic?
I think they did some things good, but I think
Yeah.
they also did a lot of things bad. And I like that's a good answer as well to the question earlier about what would I want to keep in BFA. I think War Mode was a great addition. In general, the way World PvP is incentivized, I think is great. The fact that if I tag a rare, there is certain benefits to killing that rare, you know, in terms of the daily quests and things like that. So you want to fight over the resources. I think that's all great, but obviously, how your character plays out in those scenarios, maybe that's not the most ideal. So yeah, there's good and bad.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty much how I feel about it too. I mean, like, would you want to see any sort of like new PvP talents or like things like that added, like what we have now in BFA and we got in Legion?
Yeah, I would like to have more slots for PvP talents. I don't think PvP talents necessarily fix issues, but I think they're a pretty good solution to some problems that some classes have. You can add in, you know, 1 or 2 extra things, and all of a sudden your class feels just a lot more complete and fluent. So I think having more options with PvP talents and in general with talents is good. I don't like the dead talent rows as well that a lot of classes have, where it's just a full talent row, but there's only really one option that you want to go for.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think.
I don't know. Like every single time that we have you on the show, Ziqo, you give a suggestion or you complain about something, and then the next day we read it in the blue post.
It's actually been the next day every single time.
What is it today? What do you want to
What
say?
is it today?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. What are we changing today? Are we changing something PvP specific? Are we changing something for the game?
This is up
You
to
know
you.
what? You know what? Today, normally I feel like I gotta have my PP community with me.
Okay.
But today we're gonna say something that will benefit everybody. Every single time you kill Rexar, not Rexar, the Sylvanas or, you know, Thrall in a vision, you should get a +3 on your cloak.
There it is, dude.
There it is.
There it is, dude.
Wait. Help the people out.
Okay.
Man. At first, a bunch of people were requesting a bunch of things. Everybody was like saying the things that they wanted to see change in the chat. And then one dude went, "Hey, boob slider," and then everybody in chat agreed. There was world peace. Every single person agreed on one thing. Ziqo, please get the boob slider in the game.
I don't know. I feel like the alts is a big issue too. Like I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of those things that's like, why not? Like really, why not? Why don't they have
It's
that?
the end of the expansion.
Yeah,
who cares?
The Malefic cores really don't make sense to me. Why they're gated the way that they are. It's actually impossible to catch up. I've had people do the math before on when you actually catch up and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure I won't be able to catch up my hunter until like my birthday. So like it's just like, yay, I'll finally have the corruption resistance to be able to use the gear that I want. And you get to the point where in multiple games, Asmon, you've already touched upon it. This happens with a few different Blizzard games. It is super easy to get 90% of the power, and then the last 10% you just like fall off a cliff, and that last 10% takes an infinite amount of time. This time around, though, it's actually because of time gaining. And when you look at Malefic cores in particular, it creates an ecosystem where you are waiting. If you're a top end player or somebody who has just recently caught up and went really hard, you're waiting a month for maybe a reward, maybe 2 months.
And every single week that takes longer. Every week it's harder for you to catch up. And there's literally no reason for that to be the case.
Why bother with time-gated content in the first place? I mean,
some time gates are okay. I mean, like we have weekly lockouts on raids. The weekly lockout is a time gate. I'm okay with some time gating, but it has to serve a purpose or make sense. That type of time gating doesn't, I believe.
Also, a few people are bringing up rank 15 cloak. Look, the catching up to rank 15 is definitely not great. But I think the thing is you can do it, right? You can hit rank 15. Hitting your Malefic core cap is pretty much impossible. So after you hit rank 15, you're able to get Malefic core drops. They add +3 corruption resistance to your gear, and you can get them if you're caught up. you get them either from a full clear of your vision, or you get it off of Ny'alotha in normal difficulty or higher. If you're behind, you're able to get 2 a week, and that's the catch-up mechanic. You're able to get 2 a week. And that, like Asmon said, you get further and further behind with every single day if you do miss out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually think getting rank 15 is not that bad. I will say though that the toxic thing about getting to rank 15 right now is you're actually Pepeg if you aren't getting carried on an alt, and like that's really toxic because look, like as someone like I'm not ever going, I'm never gonna like say that I haven't gotten carried, but even if I wasn't a streamer, I would be doing something to get carried because it's actually just a mistake not to. With visions, with how they actually work. And what I've already started doing is my hunter is the easiest thing to clear visions on. Off stream, like I have been carrying people in 5 masks to get them to carry me on my alts because I have 5 alts right now. There are a huge amount of people that I know want a long boy and they've started doing gold carries. Carry meta is something that I think is bad. I just don't think that like obviously tokens are a problem in general, but when the systems themselves actually say, yo, carry, you're gonna make a lot of gold doing it. I don't even know how much do they actually cost right now. I know a lot of people are selling them for 1 WoW token
for
basically.
Like a
Some
for a WoW
too.
token for mythic N'Zoth basically.
Yeah, I just don't think that it's a good meta to have in the game. I think playing the game is much better than having someone play it for you. Because like the what do you do when the reason I'll get carried on stream too more than I'll do 5 mask visions, because at this point I think actually doing the 5 mask clears is more boring to watch because I just die in front of the boss room and I open up like Asmon reacting to somebody else reacting to Asmon reacting, and I just let it go. I have a nice cold beverage, and it's like, oh, dude, what the heck, dude? I'm like, yeah, man, he's so funny, man. Wow. And then all of a sudden I go, okay, here it is. We're opening the chest, and that's more exciting than actually doing the 5 mask clear, you know?
Let's do questions. How about that? You want to move over to the questions, Rich? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna react to you asking that question with a resounding yes. Guys, if you don't know, we do a Q&A every single show. If you do want to tweet out using that hashtag ALLCRAFT right now, I'm going to be looking at the Twitter right now. Asmon will also be looking at the chat. So anything that you guys do want to ask, go ahead and shoot those questions. I know that there's plenty of stuff that we still haven't even talked about as well. So if you do want to ask any questions about some of the new stuff in the alpha build, if you want to ask Ziqo anything about PvP, just go right ahead. You can ask whatever you do want. The first question literally had the word yep, and I'm not going to say the other word in it. Let's see. Why not get rid of rows and give the players coins that they can use and let players pick on their own with 6 picks at max level? I have no idea what that means. I just read a question that looked like
I think that guy just went through a whole six.
That's an Asmongold for sure, that question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty true, Chris. So yeah. If you're able to do that, basically, so you have 6 things and you're able to get your coins, and then you use the coins, and then you have all the 6 things and you get to pick which ones they are. I don't know, man. I mean, maybe that would work, maybe it wouldn't. Thank you very much for your question. I really appreciate it.
Okay, this is actually a good question. Do you guys ever feel like quitting the game? And like, if you ask me that in other expansions, I would have definitely said no. But I did take a break from BFA, and it was the first time I've ever really taken a break for that reason. Like, I took a little bit of a break in Cataclysm, but the break in Cataclysm was genuinely because I had just started college, and like it was life, right? I wanted to play the game, and I felt like I was missing out on the game. And, you know, I would still get I still remain subbed, and I would get in Ventrilo still with my guild and just talk to them anytime I had free time. And I felt like I was missing out, and I ended up coming back in time for like Firelands. I understand people who are like in the boat where they're like, wait, I just don't feel like I can ever catch up, and they're maybe taking a break right now. I do think this current patch made me want to play again, though, for a lot of reasons. But I rage quite a bit. I'm curious how you guys feel about that, though. I mean, Ziqo, you kind of left BFA for Classic for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always been a big advocate for like the older versions of the game. So I was obviously super excited when we finally got Classic. So yeah, I had a lot of time on my hands to play Classic, and it was also because, to be honest, I wasn't enjoying BFA that much. For me, a lot of it comes down to class design, how it just feels playing your class in general, and I like Classic, like playing BGs as a mage, for example. I liked it more in Classic than doing it on retail. So I played Classic for a long time, and 8.3 kind of sucked me back in, and it just comes in patches. I think some patches you don't necessarily enjoy the game that much, and I think that's when you feel like, yeah, I want to take a break, or I want to quit for a while and see what else I can do.
I feel like quitting the game every Tuesday, probably somewhere around 5 to 10 seconds after I open my box. And besides
when you go get the
that,
sword.
yeah, I don't really ever feel like quitting. It's like I'm never really gonna quit the game. Like, let's be real. I mean, maybe if they do something like really dumb, like 10 times, I might quit the game. But realistically, I'm fucking addicted. I've collected so many damn things in this game. I'm not quitting now. Okay, it's not gonna happen. Yes, the sunk cost fallacy is in full effect, and I'm not gonna leave the game. Occasionally I go over and I play other games. I'll go and I'll play, I play Classic for a while until that got boring. I play PoE. I play, Dark Souls or PUBG or like Modern Warfare, something like that, a Warzone, and that's great. But I always come back to WoW. It's a reality.
Yeah. I actually think this PoE league is super good timing. Yet again, I swear the timing for the PoE leagues is always so good to like kind of suck you in. But yeah, I think Tuesday's kind of the time of the week when I rage a lot too. And I actually think that the rage is further pushed when you have a bunch of people saying, "Yo, you said this last week, dude. You're just gonna get over it in 10 minutes." And you're like, "No, this time's different. Like, shut up."
Yeah.
And you just completely start foaming at the jowls. It's tough. How do you feel about making Torghast into a dungeoneering sort of experience akin to RuneScape with puzzles and professions coming into play? So I actually don't know if any of us would understand the RuneScape component of that.
I used to play Diablo back in those days.
Yeah, I only farmed RuneScape for gold because I heard if you get enough gold, you get a girlfriend. But
is that like the poems?
No, it's a little bit different. There was this guy named Methodical John who actually did do that. He finally got enough gold, and we haven't heard of him in quite some time because he finally got enough gold. But the thing is it's a RuneScape thing. It's fine. The dungeoneering idea to it, there are puzzles in Torghast right now. How have you felt about them, Asmon?
I feel like they're not puzzling enough. They're too easy to do. Like, it's like, for example, like that one Oldham like special event thing that nobody does because nobody knows how to figure it out? Where you have to click
Which
the
one
little
of them?
buttons. I'll do
any Oldham.
Okay. Well, I feel like the Torghast. So you've got like 3 things with Torghast. Number 1, you've got the things that go woof 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 back and forth. That's not really a big deal. That's like Sense Fortress stuff from Dark Souls. Then you've got the fire things, and you've got the spikes, which you can usually just use a movement ability to go over completely.
Well, those are the traps.
That's not enough. Wait, what do you mean?
What about the chests?
Yeah. The chests would be closer to a puzzle because, like, right now,
but they follow the same. So they follow the exact same paradigm. So the way that the chests work is that, at least this is how it worked whenever I did it last time. There are 4 levers, and 1 lever controls itself, and then 3 other levers,
yeah.
and then another one, and then you can match 2 of the same colors with that, and then there's a second lever which controls 2 of the other colors, that color and then another color. And then there's a third lever that does the same thing but opposite, so you have to decide which one of those you want to use. And then the last lever just controls its own color. So you can figure out every single chest if you know what the system is. you can figure it out. That's how I did it on my stream. I do it in like 5 seconds, 10 seconds or something, except for one of them I can never figure out.
It's but so easy now.
Yeah, but as soon as you figure
yeah.
out like what the pattern is and like the way that it works, it's a joke. So like that's not, I don't know, like they need to make them much more complex. And I don't even think that's a good idea, honestly. I think they should do puzzles that are more built around kind of your player, like movement, rather than, you know, things like Ned Nash guitar puzzles, for example.
It sounds really complex, but it's not.
It's not. Like, trust me. Like,
yeah,
if you've done it,
it's basically like you actually don't
yeah.
even think about it after you've cracked it. It's basically you look for the one that changes a lot of the colors. You say, okay, these colors look good because the chains have busted off, and then you look for the one that only does one, and you finish it off. It's not that difficult. Once you figure out the pattern, it takes like 3 seconds, unless you're Quinn. I've Quinn's still trying to figure out I loved watching Quinn do Torghast. It made me feel so good. He's like, oh, what's he gonna do? He's like, game. So it's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't necessarily think that you need to add in anything with those puzzles in particular. I think maybe you add a few more. But I do think a dungeoneering aspect is not a bad idea. Like making the run feel a little bit more cohesive, I think could be something that's very interesting based off of the bosses maybe that you do see, because there are hints of that right now. I mean, Torghast, in my opinion, is still pretty bare bones, right? Which is fine. It's in the alpha. But I feel like there are hints of them wanting to do things like that. Like, for example, when you get, they're kind of like the Valkyrie, or no, like the shadow looking guys that leave the puddles on the ground. If you actually blow up one of them with the anima thing, you will get a cell that makes it so you can suck up the pools, and they actually turn into healing pools, right? And things like that, I don't think have any payoff in Torghast right now. Like Torghast has hints of this is the type of run and this is the solution, but right now there is no thought. You don't go, wow, these are the problems that I have. This is the way I'm going to play around it. You just go, oh, I'm just going to get more secondary stats. And you just keep getting more and more secondary stats until you're a god. And that makes it feel relatively flat. So I think saying dungeoneering aspect sounds really good to me.
Yeah.
How do you guys think it's seemingly so hard for other MMOs to compete with World of Warcraft?
It's the same problem that social networks have, is that you need a lot of content, and you need I guess for social networks, nobody wants to be on a social network website that doesn't have anyone on it. And then because of that, nobody goes on it, and because nobody goes on it, there's nobody on it. And I think that WoW has the same problem, or other MMOs have the same problem, is that because they don't have an existing kind of player base, then they don't end up kind of developing a player base because they don't have an existing one. But I think also, like most MMOs that come out recently, they don't have as much of a good end game. I think that's really what the main problem is. But I don't know nowadays. I mean, this is like something that was, I would say this like 5 years ago, but I don't know what like Final Fantasy's end game is, or what a lot of these other end games are. But I just feel like a lot of times the end games don't really have, they have like horizontal progression and not really vertical progression in terms of character power. And then also the things that you do in the end game are like fundamentally recursive. So you're just like redoing the same thing over and over and over. And that's not really as fun.
The idea of critical mass, I think, is obviously something that's really important, right? It's a conundrum that's going to exist in a social game like an MMORPG. It's very hard to get around. I think Asmon definitely hit that right on the nose. I think the other problem that you're just going to have with MMOs in general is how much you need to invest to create a rich MMO that actually offers everything that it needs to have. It is just not a financially viable thing to do. And I think that's why we don't see many good ones popping up.
Well, I feel like MMOs in general is it's a very niche like genre of games as well. I think most people want, kind of a battle royale, instant gratification, get in the action right away and start playing type of games. Whereas MMO is more like, well, you make a character and it's gonna be weak. You're gonna be a little, piece of dirt on the side, but slowly but surely you're going to progress it and you're going to become that character, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like the target audience for MMOs in general maybe is a little bit smaller, as well. In addition to, obviously other factors.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's I think the main thing is like the players, personally, like not having players.
Yeah, there are a lot of things going on, right? It's I think a lot of it though is just financial model, right? And getting the players to do that falls into the financial model as well, but it also impacts the way that the game's actually played.
Yeah.
And look at the revenue stream. It's not uncommon for things to be based around the revenue stream that they actually can have, and sometimes revenue streams allow for really good things to exist. I mean, look at PoE. Like that is a game that I feel good every time I spend money on PoE, and I feel good a lot. But it really is like it's a free game, and because of how it's actually built, they can build a game for the people that love the game instead of building a game for people who don't want to play the game. And I think that that's a problem that WoW will kind of always have, right? I mean, WoW needs to make money off of people who aren't playing the game. That's the only way that it really does get growth.
That's really well. I mean, the thing is that you don't always need to continuously like appeal to a larger and larger audience, and I think that's one of the problems that WoW has had, is that they've tried to feel that like they needed to appeal to a larger and larger audience, and what I think they've done over the time of doing that is they've just alienated people, because they
kind of divided the players.
well, they've made the original audience like there's a certain point where it's like if you have somebody that likes the fast-paced action of Call of Duty, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of overlap between somebody who likes Call of Duty and somebody who likes playing chess, for example. So if you try to make your game more like chess and your Call of Duty, well, then you're going to alienate your original fans. And I think it is important to make sure that you lean into making the people that are your core audience happy, and then seeing how you can build up that core audience rather than just trying to pull another audience from somewhere else.
I see. So what you're saying basically is what's happened to the game is that the game used to function in a specific way, and that built up a big audience, and then now they completely changed that to try to appeal to new people, and that's not working.
Yeah, it's pretty much what's happened. Yeah, because
I agree. Kind of.
With like Wrath the Lich King, for example, I think that they made a lot of concessions to very casual players that didn't want to invest a lot of time in the game. And that's where we saw the subs start to flatline, and the amount of people who were playing the game, especially when Cataclysm came out by that time, and you had all of these systems in the game in full swing with like multiple raid difficulties and all that kind of stuff. You had that all in full swing. That's whenever you really started to see people lose interest with the game.
And do you think it should be like we should go back a bit more to that and try to still kind of be in like some kind of middle ground there, or do you think we should just go back completely and just abort kind of this line of thinking?
What's really odd about it is that I don't think it's really either one. I think it's just about having a core game philosophy and making sure that you build the game around that philosophy and making the core audience happy, not necessarily trying not to or trying to appeal to new players. I think the main thing is just making sure that you're making a good game, and it felt like WoW Classic was the focus in WoW Classic was to make a good game, and the game could appeal to all kinds of different players. And I think that the interesting thing about it is that WoW Classic in a lot of ways was much more hardcore than retail WoW in terms of accessibility and like time invested in getting max level and everything. But I think that on a functional level, giving everybody the same uniform experience is less fulfilling than allowing players to create their own experience, which is why I think Classic did so well and Vanilla did so well. And now you have everybody who's pretty much shuttled and, corralled into going down one uniform experience of the game. And because of that, that uniform experience doesn't really feel compelling or fulfilling for those people, because it's not anything that they've really created. It's just something that's been created by the game for them to do.
Look at it this way, though. This is somewhat tangential, but this is just like what it makes me think of.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've been thinking about for a little bit. I feel like one of the biggest problems in that vein is the idea that coming back to the game, I feel like the game doesn't want me to come back. It's like, which I hate as a player who look, I have a decent understanding of what's going on, right? And where the actual power gain is. I know that once I get my cloak up to the level where it gets its proc, I'm going to get 10k damage. I know if I get this Azerite trait, I'm going to get another 20k damage. I know that, and like all of this stuff is just passive stuff that's like guaranteed without even playing my class. Once I get my corruption, get enough echoes, get the right piece to put it on, I'm going to get this much damage. I understand what's going on in that regard, and at times it feels hopeless. And I feel like the game is just like, hey, why are you coming back, you idiot? Go outside. You're stupid. Go outside, you idiot. Yeah. But every now and then, I'll say something in the chat about how hard, or I'll say something on stream about like how hard it is to actually catch up, and say something about that exact sentiment that I hold. And then somebody will just be like, man, it's really not that bad. I've been back for 3 weeks and I'm already 440 item level. And they actually genuinely, I'm not making fun of that person. That person genuinely thinks that like they think that they've gotten a lot of power and they think that they're in a great spot. First of all, they still think that item level is like the main thing giving them damage, right? Like they're like, oh, I got item level. Maybe a new player who's actually a Papeg and doesn't realize what you can do in the game right now sees all of that and goes like, yo, like, look, this was a smooth progression, you know? I got my character boost, and then after that, you know, I did some world quests. I did some random heroics. I did a war front. Do you think that that is a valid thing, that maybe knowing too much about the game is just what's making it bad? Like maybe you just shouldn't know what's going on?
That and the min-max mentality for sure contributes, but I still think that in my experience, the games that I loved the most, and even like WoW when I liked it the most, it felt like it was catered, like you were trying to make the game as difficult as possible and you're trying to adjust the game to how the top players are playing it. And then it kind of just went down, like it just kind of fell down on everybody else from the top, you know, like the knowledge would kind of trickle down and people at the bottom would get better and better, you know?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Like I don't think that they should necessarily design the game. I think that it's more that the casual player experience, I don't like to be a watered down version of the hardcore player experience.
Yeah,
I feel like that's fundamentally the problem.
Because the content can be a reward in and of itself, has always been the opinion for me. Like if LFR existed as a thing that you know, was a different scenario that teased the raid and was like the epilogue, and it had decent gear, I think that that's better than just having a watered down version of the raid. Because at the end of the day, you just saw the boss, you saw the dragon. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a green dragon this time. Nice, dude. Yeah, I saw it. I'm gonna go back to watching television, because you already saw the big bad. Like seeing the boss was part of the fun. You remember, you're like, yo, I get to walk into the frozen throne for the first time. We finally cleared everything. I actually get to see this, dude. That was part of the awesome grandeur of the game. So I do agree with that. I also really dislike the fact that the casual experience, and I understand why the casual experience would move towards this, right? It doesn't take too much thought to really realize this. Of course, the casual experience is based off a player who's not going to have as much time to be able to form groups, right? But the casual experience is completely dictated by solo player content, right? Like if I casually play a character, I never need to play with anyone else, and you can get a lot by not playing with anyone. But that just creates an ecosystem where you're never brushing shoulders with those top end players that are doing other stuff that tell you about it and then you want to do it. There isn't that ecosystem where the really good players want to play their alts, which causes more people to be doing the old raid content. A lot of that's outdated because of item level bloat. But all in all, it just creates this system where instead of playing an MMORPG, instead of playing World of Warcraft, where you need other people to get through, you're just basically playing a daily simulator.
That's about right. You want to do one more?
Yeah, so this one is says, have you guys reconsidered naming the show Baldcraft now that you're both bald?
I don't know. Not on this episode, at least.
Okay, so that thank you, Ziqo.
No.
Thank you for rubbing it in.
Yeah.
I'm going, Rich.
So this question is really good. Do you think that the boosting meta is going to go away when we do get into the next expansion, or do you think that's something that's here to stay?
No.
No, you think it's here to stay?
It's staying.
Yeah, I agree with Asmon. I think it's gonna be here to stay. Like when you look at the Discord servers that are essentially they have like advertisers and people who boost for them, and you have all of these people that organize everything. It's like actually very organized. It's very easy to make gold boosting, and I think as long as gold is a needed thing in the game, people are gonna look to make it.
I feel like gold boosting, like if you don't have BOEs, I feel like the reason why boosting got so big at 8.3 is because of corruption BOEs, though. If there wasn't corruption BOEs, there wouldn't have been such an economy around it.
True, but then you would still spend that gold. I mean, sure, as many people wouldn't have farmed that gold, but I feel like people would still spend that gold on mythic boosts and on 5-mass boosts for their alts and on mythic plus carries.
It's so absurd because the economy is you boost to buy boosts.
Yeah, like no, that's literally what it is.
It's the whole. It's like when you talk about boosting meta, it is actually like the game. Like you probably want your long boy. A lot of people will forgo the long boy though for player power. But some people, they want their long boy. That might be a reason that you boost. That's 5 million gold. You're done. The other thing, like Asmon said, was BOEs, which was rampant in this particular patch. But the main thing that people are buying is more boosts. Yeah. It's wild.
True. I mean, that's what I did. I boosted, a lot of people in twos, and I took all the gold I made and bought PvE boosts.
Yeah, to then be able to play twos.
Exactly, to be able to abuse my mythic dress trinket and my Ny'alotha gear and everything, and my mount that I don't even have flying for, to use that to win more games in arena and farm more echoes.
It's a corrupt game. Same as
like realizing that.
Same as classic though. I think that this is actually a good talking point. Do you think it felt different in classic? Because I personally did.
It's completely different.
I think
obviously you have leveling boosting. That's one thing, but you don't really have raid boosting because the difference between the reason why you do a 5-mask boost is because it gives you a guaranteed reward. The reason that you do a Ny'alotha boost is because it gives you a guaranteed reward. The reason why you do Mythic Ny'alotha boost is because it gives you a guaranteed reward. Classic doesn't have guaranteed rewards from raiding, and because of that, boosting isn't as prevalent.
Well, also, because in Classic, you need the bodies. It doesn't matter if they're an idiot. You just want 40 people. So the boosting thing isn't really a thing, because if you can't do the raids just off of being a warm body in Classic, there is something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. It's not hard content. It's stand here, press one button, move on. And usually people react to that where they think I'm making fun of the game. I'm not. People actually played the game back then the way that it's meant to be. I think that there is a lot of arguments for more and more intense systems. I definitely do think that there are, but I'd much rather see people playing the game rather than paying gold to experience the game.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot.
Is it better to spam Frostbolt and that's it? Or is it better to sit dead in the corner? I want to see people actually play the game. As much as I love some of the crazy stuff that does happen, and it's just I want people to actually play the game and enjoy it and get the loot. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, boosting is going to happen no matter what. I think that really just draw the line on real life money boosting and then just let people do whatever the hell they want to do. I mean, there's even a lore thing. I remember somebody said, imagine the lore of having, I think it was you, Rich, I don't know, of having a goblin that just pays every other person to just do all the stuff for him. I don't know. I feel like, from a roleplay perspective, that actually does kind of work.
I feel like from a streamer perspective, that also kind of works.
Yeah, people keep saying that. They're like, coming from the guy who gets boosted. Look, you don't understand what's fully going on. I care.
You can smoke cigarettes and still know they give you cancer.
Well, look at it this way. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but personally, I care about the community more than anything, right? I just care about the community. And if somebody gets joy from the game by carrying one of my alts, who am I to stand in the way of that pleasure? If somebody wants to get to carry, so everybody can see on stream how good they are, but it's the least I can do. I'm just giving back to the community. I don't care about the gear. I care about people being happy. And
I'm glad that you're so selfless, Rich, and you're able to do that for other people. It really is. It's really, really good.
They get to be a god.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it's all about. You got to have those community.
Give back to the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only to the community members with 480 item level, of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because you don't want to have people. You want to have people who are really big parts of the community. They invest the most into the community, so they can then invest the most into you.
You don't want to bring the low item level people because you don't want them to look bad on stream.
Yeah, you don't have to embarrass themselves. It's actually
you just don't want them to embarrass themselves.
Anyway, boys, we've had a very, very good episode. I appreciate you coming on, Ziqo. I really do. Thank you very much, man. And hopefully we'll be keeping an eye out for patch notes tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So
thanks for having me again.
Thanks. Of course, man. Yeah, thanks a lot.
We haven't really chatted since you came back, but it's good to see you back again.
Thank you, man.
It's going well.
It's nice to be back. It's certainly odd too, getting up now at 9 in the morning instead of 9 at night. But that's pretty much the main difference.
How long you been back now? 3 months?
I don't think about that. 3 months already? All right, time for another break. I didn't realize we've been going this far. Oh, thank God, guys.
New PoE league, dude. It's about time for the break.
Right,
that's usually how it goes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, man, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it. Obviously, as always, Rich and I are going to be doing the after show on his stream, and I'm going to host into that in just a couple of minutes. So if you guys want to stick around and ask us some questions directly, we will be taking viewer call-ins. So just stay tuned for that. But again, guys, thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And thank you again, Ziqo, for coming on. Guys, make sure to spam Zico's socials in the chat, and you guys can follow him. He's got more rank 1 titles than anybody I know. And it's completely fucking ridiculous. How many is it now?
This will be my 17th season.
17.
I took a break, so it's been slowing down a little bit.
Yeah.
But we'll hopefully get back at it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for coming on, and I'll go ahead and end the stream. And Rich, I'll see you on your stream.
Yeah, see you in a little bit.
Bye, guys.
All right. See you later. Peace.